Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, like he does every week, is my co-host Tyler. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey man, good to be here. Good to see everybody.
Good to have you back. Also joining us this week for the first time, happy to have him on the show, Sean Sayer, scholar, professor, Legion of the First Prince enthusiast, who is going to be our subject matter expert today to take us through this not real army. How you doing, sir?
I am doing extraordinarily well, and it's great to be here. This is going to be the event that defines my life into before and after. So thank you for this.
I look. I'm sure you're going to win everybody over to the Legion of the First Prince today, and they're going to demand that we have you back on the show. So I have no worries. And also, your hobby space is excellent. So I'm
Thank you.
in for that already. I love this. I love the table you're working, like your boxes on the shelves there behind. Classic, super classic. It's great. Got the Detolf in frame there. The world
And
famous
unfortunately,
Detolf.
you can't see the shelves up here with all the built chaos minis, some painted, some non. I have my non-chaos here, so I couldn't swing it around.
God, that's all good. So yes, we are going to talk about Legion of the First Prince today and get into it. So, what is this army? Who is this army? When is this army? Why
Why?
is this army? But of course, first off, the news. Tyler, what do you got?
Sir, Rumor Engine feels like for the 100th time a 40K thing.
Yep, we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But yep, it's 40K thing next.
Next, LVO preview. So we got that going on tomorrow, or if you're in London, that'll be 6 a.m. GMT on the 28th your time, 10 p.m. Pacific. Strange time.
It would still be tomorrow for them if they're in the UK right now, Tyler, because it's tomorrow in the UK right now.
Fair enough. That's very fair. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're
And
actually lying to people if they're on the East Coast. Because if they're in the Eastern time zone, I suppose, or Central, then technically it's happening during on Friday morning. And it's currently Wednesday still. So that's where you're actually a liar. For those people in like Newfoundland, they're in big trouble.
so I don't know if you have any images from this. We've
I
seen
do. I have the
few
little
different
image
things.
up of
Yeah.
the five things that are getting previewed. Okay.
Mhm.
And there, I couldn't find the one that they shared on Facebook in an image that actually didn't look like crap of the outline of the three miniatures or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't have that, but I know they have three miniatures, and like one of them is clearly the avatar of Kane from the updated Eldar range. So fine.
Yeah.
And then there's another 40k guy in there clearly, and then there's one we think is one of ours. Um, Here's my statement. I read
Fucking-
this image right here as the following. Okay, I'm gonna read from left to right, top to bottom. Everybody with me? Here we go. I'm read this as 40k AOS, basically 40k, basically 40k, basically 40k. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm not too excited about what we're gonna see during this preview.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get a book announcement. That's what I'm thinking for IDK
Right.
and Fire Slayers.
Yeah, like hopefully we get the combined dwarf tome. That rumor's been floating around today. So maybe that's what will actually happen instead of just a standard Fire Slayers tome. But like if we just see here's an IDK book, here's a Fire Slayers book, yes, they're next. You all knew it. Okay, let's get back to the 40k stuff. And it'd be like, all right, great.
Mm.
Well, they had in one of the images that I had seen an ironclad in, the silhouette of an ironclad. So I personally hope they're just screwing with us, throwing that in there, just kind of leaning into the whole, we're going to get a suit book with KO and Fire Slayers. But yeah. So probably nothing too exciting. It looked like a Nighthaunt hero, though, that silhouette with the three images that we had
Could
seen.
be. I saw
The one in
people
the
also
center.
say they thought it was an LRL hero, so
Who knows?
We're due. We are due for
we
another,
are due. It's 2022 and we don't have an LRL book yet. I don't know what's happening. So
Oh.
there you go.
I just think if we don't get some serious AOS announcements here, we're due for some love. So I'm going to be expecting a lot over the next few months or into the summer.
My particular guess is it is all 40k all the time until we get to Adepticon. And then for probably like a month after that, as the rest of the releases trail and we catch up to what they previewed at Adepticon. I just think 40K is so far behind right now. You know, they're like they had so many backlog codices and releases and everything that they had planned fully to get out last year, and because of all the shipping nonsense, it all got pushed back. I have to believe that we're just not going to get much in the way of attention for a while. So
I'm curious to see if anyone has plotted out the releases on the calendar for like the past 5 or 6 years. Is there a 40K season? You know, is there an AOS sort of? I'm not sure if anyone's done that, but
I mean, you could map it easily because there is the Lexiconum or whatever keeps all the exact release dates, month and year of all the different books in both 40K and AOS, so you could certainly plot it. I think it would be pretty, just from like my sense of it, this isn't science, this is just my sense of it, it would be pretty jumbled, right? Okay. Because I think in general they'll often be spikes, you know, like around an edition change or something like that, but it's pretty jumbled in together.
It's good.
I was going to say, there's also a website, I think ageofminiatures.com, where they're tracking everything. Did a pretty good job, you know, the last couple of years. So, all right, Nurgle Fac. Nothing really in there that was too surprising.
Yes, nothing in there.
Right? Yeah.
Like, so I brought up the Nurgle Fac here so we can just have it on the screen.
We got the answer that I know a lot of people did not want to get, but that in fact 3 feculent normals are just, they're not giving you 9 points, they're just giving you 3 points, 1 point each. Contagion points.
Okay. If you ever I'm pretty sure this is one of those things that when we reviewed it,
here we go.
I said, you can either agree with the obvious rule that it's going to be 1 per tree, or you can be wrong. That's your choice. Welcome to being wrong. If you legitimately thought that the real rule was some kind of weird multiplicative thing that wouldn't be prima facie obvious, and they wouldn't have put an example text to say as much, you are out of your minds. Like, guys, I love you. I know you want all those contagion points. And I love people justify their belief in wrong things in weird ways. Like, people said, but then the summoning won't be any good. And I'm like, yeah. That's right. That's exactly what they were going to do. So, just like, I'm not trying to beat people who got the answer they didn't want here when they're down. But, like, obviously, just that GW writes rules in the way that they think the simplest reading of them is how they think they're going to work. The rule is never supposed to be, wait, but if you parse the sentence exactly like this and then read it like this in this situation, then this is the real rule. No, that's not how they write rules.
Hold on. To be fair, and Haywood did a good job of pointing this out, you know, does speculum normal do what it unequivocally says it does for generating contagion? No, you were supposed to define what we meant and ignore what words mean. Again,
I disagree with Haywood's take here. Like, I understand why they said that. But, like, when they wrote it, they read it as 1 feculent normal. It doesn't matter. It's 1 per. There you go. End. So, whatever. Sean, anything else from this grab your attention?
Most definitely. The biggest thing that got my attention was what was not in here. And that is that host of Nurglings on the Guo were not changed into mounts, which means it is just a weapon profile, which means it can be a melee weapon that is affected by an artifact or a spell, and it's 15 hits, 15 attacks from the Nurglings, which stays pretty solid until I think it suffers 7 wounds, and then it drops to like 10.
Yeah.
And then we've got that wonderful Gur command ability that lets him fight on top bracket. So in Legion, you know he's getting the 4-file blade.
I was just about to say, I have a feeling we're going to have a use for those Nurglings in just a little while. Stay tuned.
Yep.
Yes,
in fact, I still need to finish up my
Guo.
Guo. Yeah, I still need to finish up my Guo, and I've got all the Nurglings from all the Nurgle kits. And I'm going to stack them up to where they're holding this massive sword, and that's going to be my 4-file blade.
Amazing. I love it. Yes, that's very funny. It's funny what is a crew or a mount and what isn't, and sometimes those aren't always intuitive. I'll completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I the fact that they had to clarify which one is corrupted, like which one is command points and which one are contagion points. I completely understand their need to clarify that. Why they used the same acronym, I don't know. I don't know. Like, how did we get through all those levels of reading, editing, and playtesting, and no one was like, "Hey guys, which one did you mean here?" Because this is kind of confusing.
Yeah, it does make me question the process a bit.
But you know,
All right, yeah.
other than that, all good stuff. The Noxious Nexus does something now again. It does what we all kind of expected it to do. So, you know, yep, good stuff. All fine.
Straightforward. I just want to give a shout out to, I think it's Davis Ford. He does AOS Reminders. He did a nice update to it. So getting all the recent, the Nurgle fact, the Soulblight White Dwarf info, White Dwarf OBR info. I got that all updated, AOSReminders.com. Ongoing amazing resource in the community. So thank you, man, for your great work on that. That's
nice.
all I had. Got anything else?
Nope. Quick news section today. Let's keep moving. All right. So, let's move to some pick of the week. Sean, you're the guest. What would you like to share with everybody?
Oh, goodness. Now, I got this cleared with Vince beforehand. I'm actually going to pick something from his show, from his channel. It's not part of Warhammer Weekly. But Vince did a series of tabletop history videos way back when in 2016, when the world was a bright, sunny place and things were different. And they're wonderful. Vince kind of goes back and looks at starting in 1975, and then he goes through the development of Games Workshop, not just looking at GW, but looking at other minis as well, the development of wargaming. I'd recommend as an historian that folks take a look at this. I came into Age of Sigmar Starter second edition. I hadn't done any sort of tabletop wargaming at all. My community where I grew up wasn't big. So I'm glad that I had these to sort of catch up. And I think it's a great resource for us. And hopefully people start watching them and commenting on them. Vince will make more of them.
See what we can do. Thank you very much. Those were very fun to do. And they're, the early history of GW is absolutely fascinating. And those early editions, I think, yeah, it's they were fun to make. They were just time consuming. I've had a lot of people ask me to continue them, but it's just a time consuming thing to make because it takes a lot of research and stuff. So but we'll see. Tyler, what do you got for pick of the week?
All right, got a few. So the Stormkeep, the Stormcast guys did an excellent state of the game video on problems and the proposed solutions. I thought they did a nice job of outlining what are some of the current issues. Some of their solutions I had some disagreements with, but they had some good ideas in part on solutions, so definitely check that out. And then Warp Charge Gaming and Oscar Lars, the amazing painter Oscar Lars on the East Coast, they just did some live battle reports that they put online. So for their tournament league, they're just getting started at Battlegrounds in Virginia. Warp Charge Gaming is the YouTube channel. So they've got they did 3 rounds over the last weekend. Yeah, really good bat reps. Watched some of those over the weekend. And then finally, one and only AOS Shorts, Dan has made a big update to his website, aosshorts.com. So the tournament results spreadsheet that he's been tracking on an ongoing basis for a while now, he has linked all of the list for 4+ wins results from events around the world. So he's created different pages on his website, kind of a big one, and then you can go into like Stormcast. Here's the Stormcast list for the 4, 1, and 5-0 wins. And yeah, it's an amazing resource. He's going to add commentary to it in the coming months. So definitely check that out.
Very nice.
That's all I got.
Awesome. There we go. Jeez, my camera would not focus properly, and it was really driving me insane. At any rate, for myself, my pick of the week is for our buddy 2+ Tough. And he tells it's in his video talking about why Cities of Sigmar has such potential. And I agree with him. I think it remains one one of the most interesting armies around. They could do so much of it. They could just keep putting out Cities of Sigmar books forever, as we've said on this show many times. I hope it gets more attention. I hope we see some manifestation of the Dawnbringer Crusades. So I hope once we do get back to AOS releases that it's in there. Doug talks about a lot of cool ideas and why the army is really interesting. And so go check it out. All of that is linked down in the video description. All right. Very good. Moving through it. Okay. Let's talk about some hobby time, gentlemen. Sean, what have you been working on? You got a lot of boxes around there. What's being painted? What's being done?
Time. I just collect Warhammer boxes, actually.
It's a good hobby.
I'm just trying
You're
to
not alone.
fill up all the cubbies in the shelf, posting those Reddit pics of my my plunders. I'm actually working on a couple soul grinders. I was miffed that they did not get any point drops, but I have some custom bases I'm working on. I did some conversions on them. Put a Slanesh, I don't know if you can tell, put the Slanesh pieces from the Keeper here.
Nice.
Some corn things on this guy. And the second one over here, I did the legs from a Megath Lord for his claw. So I wanted him to have a little bit of something from all four of the Chaos factions for Legion. So those guys are going to take a little while, but I'm using the Vallejo metal color paints that this guy Vince Ventrella said I should try, and they're awesome in the airbrush. So thank you for that. Good stuff. And hopefully they'll get done sometime within the next month.
Nice. Oh, Soul Grinder, how I love you and wish that you were good. But I think we'll see some defense of it today. So there you go.
And just real quick, Vince, I do want to point out that I'm the only person on this channel who is not playing Warhammer with a Vince Ventrella painted army, and I would like to talk to you about that after the show.
It's a nice try. It's a nice try. All right.
Don't bother asking. Don't ask me your stupid question. I want one night where I don't have to answer that stupid question. Right. Let's move on.
Tyler.
Yes.
Did you paint anything?
Of course you did. So, moving on.
Did you get any games?
Modify the question. So I was thinking, can you modify the question? Have you commissioned someone to paint anything?
Yeah, I have something in progress. Yeah, it's going to be quite a while, but yeah, I do have something in progress. So got some progress on the important front there. Yeah. Vince, we need to talk after the show and get a game plan, but we are finally ready to launch these battle plans, these fan favorite General's Handbook, past General Handbook battle plans translated into 3.0. Very excited about this. So thanks to everybody who's been involved in this project. We've had like 4 one-dayers over the past couple of months around the world. We've had just a ton of games and play testing of these missions. So really hoping that they're going to work out well, but really interested to see the feedback we'll get on them. So we are ready to rock and roll. But Vince, we need to talk about how we're going to launch these things.
Awesome. Very good. I look forward to the conversation. All right. For myself, I've had quite a bit of hobby time. Most of what I've been working on is still I actually just finished him, but I still have his base to go. Is one of the miniatures, one of the sort of larger scale miniatures from Miniac's upcoming Kickstarter. And I've been further putting off working on my display board. So that's the basic goal there, is to continue just not working on that, I guess. I'm going to have to do something soon. But we'll do what we can. I have a bunch of stuff I need to assemble for it. I just don't want to do it. But he's all done. He's over there. I'm pretty happy with him. I also finished up a little Demon Prince. Been working on a lot of different videos. Just grinding them back to back to back to back to really try to up the video quality and play around with trying to make videos that aren't bad. That's the basic goal. So there we go. All right. I'm sorry I don't have anything to hold up to the camera today. What's that?
I did forget one thing. So Sean recently participated in the Great Plains Masters Invitational.
Oh, there you go.
This was started by our friend Mitchum Ernst. More of an acquaintance. I haven't had a chance, I guess. Mitchum, you and I don't know each other that well yet, so. But he seems like an awesome guy. He's part of the Oklahoma scene. And yeah, they're doing this. And Sean, can you tell us a little bit about it? I know 8 players.
Yeah, I'd love to. So it was an 8-player event. It happened on Saturday. It seems small, but the way the Great Plains Masters works, it's folks from Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, in Missouri. So if you're in those states and you're playing, get a hold of me and I'll get you in touch with us. We got a Discord, but the season lasts from February until October. And I'm sorry to say that Tyler here went 3-0, but one day event, but it's pre-season starting, so he can't count that.
There's so much crap about whether I was going to mention that on this show. Like I haven't done that well at tournaments in a while. I haven't gone to that many tournaments, and I was good.
You did well. Well, you're just gonna have to do well again. I know you.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
But it's a great because it collects your score over the season. So I ended up going 16-1 with Legion of the First Prince in that, and I got I think it was ranked second under Paul Wright, who of course is a beast out here when it comes to AOS with his Deepkin. And so it was 8 players. It was great because highly competitive players. They knew their game. They knew their armies, but they were all chill and laid back with single elimination, which is fun as hell. Like, I'm sorry, it's just awesome because one and done. And so it gets rid of a lot of stress. You don't have to worry about rankings. But it was just a great time. It ended up being taken by Joe Vusic, running Cities of Sigmar. He's the one who took me out in round 2 because I made a couple mistakes. I was like, I'm not going to play the center objective game with those Phoenix Guard and the Frost Phoenix, and I ended up being 2 points shy because of round 3, and he took the game. But it was really good.
What was the mission in that one?
That was it was the 3 in the middle. I want to say Survival of the Fittest, where you start far back. It's the small deployment in the corners. Yeah, and
that or First Blood.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of fun. A great event. Again, if you're in the Midwest, get a hold of us. It's wonderful. I would love to see different regions do this, and then we could have some sort of larger event where the winners from those regions get together at a sort of a national level. I think that'd be great. But it was a wonderful experience. It really was.
Yeah, very cool, man.
Very nice.
Excellent. Yeah, it's doing great work there.
Awesome. Sounds cool as. All right, gentlemen. Well, are we ready then to pivot to a little discussion on the Legion of the First Prince?
Indeed.
We don't have a choice. We have to. It was a lie. That was all a lie. Of course we're going to. Let's do this. Here we go. Chaos Demon Soup. The Legion of the First Prince. Okay, before I get into any of my summary or anything, Sean, you're the LOTFP stan here.
LFP. Really easy. LFP.
You're the Loft.
That's much better.
You're the Loft stan. Take us through it. What would be your summary of this army? Why do you like it? What do you think sets it apart? What's interesting in it about it, other than the fact that it's not a real army, doesn't exist on the website, and doesn't have its own book?
I knew this is all set up. I knew it. No. Well, I feel like I'm going to sell you on this army, Vince. That's my goal tonight. I don't know how well I'm going to do. You're already making a Demon Prince. You're already painting it, so I know that deep down you want to play this.
I do like Chaos Demons.
Yeah, Legion of the First Prince. To me, I think the first thing that attracted me to Chaos Demons was the lore. So before Legion even came out, I was collecting the 4 Chaos guys, the 4 Chaos Demon sides. And so when this Allegiance came out in Wrath of the Everchosen, and I think it was February of 2020, I was just like, sweet, I get to play with all my toys in one thing. And that's when it was the Wild West, and you could bring in anything with the demon keyword, which included Archeon. It included all of the Vermin Lords, which was a lot of fun, actually. Being able to use Kairos to cast the spell, to jump one around, it was a blast. And things have changed a little bit, but the core mechanics, the core Allegiance abilities have stayed the same. Be'lakor has become central, which I think is important, and he has a model that's worth it. But the narrative, I think, to me, is what was really awesome about the Chaos guys in general, because they are us, right? They exist because we exist, because of our emotions and our excesses and whatever these different feelings that we are, and these things that we create the Chaos gods. And so therefore we can never be completely free of the Chaos gods, because we'll never be free of ourselves. It is the defining thing that makes us human that also creates them. And so we're constantly fighting against manifestations of ourselves. So the narrative just hooked me right away. And then I was like, wait, I get to play with these things. And of course I picked Khorne Demons for my first army because it was early in 2.0. And I didn't want to have to learn magic. I was like, there's a whole phase I don't have to learn. That sounds awesome to me. Let me just deal with moving and shooting, or moving and killing. Moving and melee is all I had to deal with.
Right.
And so from there, I branched off to all these different Chaos Demons. But being able to run them together in an allegiance that actually doesn't have a lot of rules. It doesn't have a lot of allegiance abilities, and to me, that's a plus because you're looking at the war scrolls and you're using the scrolls and you're looking at the mission. So, for instance, competitively, I'll look at the mission pack. And what I do with a lot of other armies is I say, okay, how does this unit work in relationship to the allegiance abilities? So, like for instance, Khorne. It makes a lot of sense to run 30 bloodletters in Khorne in a unit because you have the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster who's going to give them reroll hits. 30 rerolling hits sounds great. But then you say, wait a minute, there's Blood Tithe. And if I take 3 10s, then I get a Blood Tithe. And so there's sort of this tension with when you're picking your units for your army between what am I getting from my allegiance abilities and what am I going to be wanting to do on missions, what's going to play the most optimally. And so with the legions, stripped down allegiance abilities, you don't have to worry about that tension, and you're able to sort of bring in all these different war scrolls and find synergies that you wouldn't normally find. And so I think it's just a great army that has all the tools you need. It can be played very many different ways. There is no the list. I'm looking at you, Rob. And you can and it's going to shift with the meta really easily. And what I mean is when we go from the GHB now, where we're in monster heavy meta, which you can monster mash all day with this. You can do four behemoths and be perfectly fine. If we go to like a horde meta, it has all the tools it needs to shift to that. If you go to a small hero meta, it's got all those tools that you need. So I think it's an extraordinarily versatile army, and I highly recommend people give it a shot.
Okay. All right.
Very good.
Okay. Very nice.
Pretty good case. I love the narrative case, especially.
Yeah, it's good. All right.
I got.
Go ahead.
I'm saying that got deep.
That was all off the cuff. I've got more.
No, it's good. All right. So here's sort of my summary of the thing. See what you think of it. So it's a soup army with many playstyles. I think this is one thing that Sean, you and I had a rousing discussion before the show. Everybody's not privy to this, but we're going to have a full-on Oxford debate later. But that's fine. We'll get to that. But one thing I think we're completely in agreement on is that this army has been cast as only a control army, and that's the only functional way it works. And I don't think that that's true. I think this actually has quite a few different playstyles. And the reason that I say it's an interesting army, and I do agree with you that it can be reactive, is this army effectively has more war scrolls than any other army. Okay, something like 80 some war scrolls. I don't remember the exact count. I apologize, but it's any demon unit from Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Slaves to Darkness, as long as it doesn't have the Everchosen keyword, right? So, okay. In other words, not Archaeon for obvious reasons, or the Gaunts. Okay. Yep.
Well, we'll talk about this probably later, but in the recent FAQ, they sort of changed Archaeon Scroll to where it's host of the Everchosen, and in the Be'lakor FAQ, it says just Everchosen, and those two are bolded, so I would never play Archaeon. He's obviously not supposed to be there. But again, a great example of the rules folks at GW just kind of missing something.
Yeah, sure. I think the intention is quite clear that obviously Be'lakor is meant to be, I mean, he's obviously, in the narrative and sort of functionally, he's meant to be doing a sort of, not an out-and-out coup against the Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse. But obviously he, sees himself as a potential successor to him because he feels like he should have been the Everchosen and was passed by and all of that. Be'lakor does have a very interesting and compelling narrative. I do completely agree with you. Okay. And I think that it has seen a lot of its success so far as a control army. And that is because, especially in a lot of the melee that it's operated in, its ability to play as a blue deck has made it very competitively successful in the current meta. That relied on being able to sort of maximize your toys. And so when someone can come in and counterspell your best toys effectively, that was a very powerful effect, right? So I do think it has different dimensions to it, although it's interesting that this one has shown a sort of higher success rate, let's say, in the competitive scene. But I don't think that means that's the only one.
On that point, Vince, so I've played this army way more than I would like to have. I actually played Sean very first game at a tournament last year, which was quite an opening game, yeah, to play. And
First
I've
of
grown.
first of three Marathi and the Bow
I heard
Stakes
that.
games that
Yeah,
day. Oh, it was awful.
that you extinguished. Yeah,
Ah,
good on you. I still think I would have had that game if my slow ass had played faster, but we can skip ahead on that. It was a close one. It was a very close one. You had me dead to rights early on. Anyway, so I've come to appreciate the value of this army, which makes me want to throw up. The We need control. We need blue deck in the meta in the ecosystem, and obviously that's what this does. So despite some of the frustrations with it, I do really see that it has a meaningful role to play.
Yep.
well, but there's also sort of this idea that because that's what people have been successful with it already, that's what it is. So when the list that I played you, Tyler, at Flying
Mhm.
Monkey was not that.
Sure.
And it was assumed by certain commentators when they talked about it that I played that. It
Hmm.
was like, oh, Legion of the First Prince, it has to have these things in it. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And so I really am kind of pushing folks in the the AOS Coach Discord, which is great. You should join it if you haven't, by the way. But his LFP chat is wonderful, and I keep trying to push folks, especially away from the Demon Prince. Say, that's a crutch. Try to get away from the Demon Prince. Try to get away from Kairos. And people have developed some really interesting lists there that have done pretty well.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I think we're going to talk about some of the units I think that are hot picks here in a little while. My other point on this is it has the ability to borrow the modular power from across different armies into a single force, right? Like that's what one of the strengths of this army is, that it can take all these different, whatever is a modularly powerful piece, whatever isn't relying on its own army's allegiance, synergies, and buffs, right? And can do something powerful, potent, interesting, useful, whatever on its own, can come over here and be a very valid piece, right? And this actually, I think, is a challenge for a lot of the scrolls. But we'll talk about that in a minute. One of the strongest control armies, it is simply that, due to the ability to put together individual army control elements. Again, not that that's the only way it has to play, but I don't think there is a stronger control army in the meta. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you go that route, yeah, definitely,
Right.
It's going to deny you if you go the list that I make. I like to think of it that I have the damage that you would expect from Khorne. I have the bodies you can get from Zeech. I have the ward save you would get from Nurgle, and I have the speed you can get from Slanesh. And I have all that in a single army. And it's tricky for opponents to deal with all of those things, especially the summoning. Oh my God, the summoning! You've got it next. Amazing, the best summoning in the game. Not contingent on anything. I don't have to do anything to make it happen. It's totally random. Bam, it happens. Bam, it doesn't. When you get that turn one summon off, you've gone top of one and you control basically 3/4 of that board. Oh, it feels so good.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's the last point, right? It has this strong summoning ability to supplement with additional troops. And exactly as you said, you're not building points, you're not tracking anything. It's just, it does it. It just summons, like, assuming you can make the roll. Okay.
Yep.
We'll talk about the specific rules in a moment, but before we get into the specific rules and before we get like of the actual army and stuff like that, I want to just talk here for a moment about some of the innate challenges of this army in my mind. Okay. So the first one is, and I'm interested to get your take, Sean, first, but Tyler, I want to hear from you as well. I don't think this is anything close to a good army for a new player.
Yeah,
I think this is
would
like
agree
your
with that.
third
Yeah.
army.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
If that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the fact that there is no like start collecting introduction. In fact, you need to buy 3 or 4 start collectings to really have all your summoning. It is not friendly. You don't have one single book that says this is all your units. You have one single book that has all your allegiance abilities, but knowing what units can go in, what their synergies are. One of the biggest questions that I get from folks is, what about this unit? Right? How can I use this one? And my recommendation is always play what you own. Right? If you already have a Chaos Army, play what you own. If you're doing a friendly game and try something out, see if they're okay with you proxying something. TTS is a good place, even though I'm a strong proponent of in-person physical games. That's why I got into this hobby, was to meet people and have that physical, real conversation with a real person. But there's ways to try this out instead of just buying this, buying that, and realizing, oh, I didn't want that 140 point Raider Demon. Then we've got it sitting on my shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one that can be an incredibly rewarding army that because it does not play itself. And yeah, there are a lot of decision points, both list building and in gameplay. And then it has the combined arms footprint that Vince, I love and I've always been a big proponent of. It's the Cities of Sigmar, in my mind, for chaos, where you can plug and play different pieces. And so I think it can be incredibly rewarding, but yeah, it's probably not your first army.
Yeah. Which again, I'm not saying that's necessarily like it is a thing, right? Like it's not. I'm not normatively assigning that value. I think it is just a fact of the army, as it were, right? Okay. So then here's my next one. I don't know if Sean froze. He might have froze. He'll be back if he did. Okay. Here's my next one. He'll be back. It's all good. There we go. Is it a problem that there are... Welcome back. It's all good. Is it a problem that there are so many trap units in this army? And what I mean by that is, like, there are 80-some potential war scrolls that can go in here, right? And most of them, you would never use, actually, in the army. Like, there's a lot of chaff. I don't mean that in a game term. I mean that in, like, the separating the wheat from the chaff, right? Like, there's just a lot of stuff that is demons you would probably never put in this army. Is that a problem? Or is it just mean that, like, no, it's just another skill floor, like, you have to get to a certain level of being able to sort of evaluate scrolls to understand what's going to make this army function? Because I could see somebody who doesn't really know just grabbing, like, their random selection of chaos demons, putting this together, and just being like, I don't get it. Why doesn't this army work? It does nothing. Right? Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it is tricky, but the Legion itself, I mean, you're going to get Be'lakor, so everyone's going to have that, so they're not going to worry about him. But the other units, I mean, the Allegiance itself is rather forgiving, actually, to be really honest. So if you're playing a suboptimal battle line choice, it might not necessarily hurt you as much as it might in other armies. Like if you went in with Plague Bearers, or you went in with, God forbid, Bloodletters, you'll have bodies on the table. You're not going to be as competitive as you might be, but I think you're still going to get a feeling of this army. But there are some other things where I just wouldn't recommend anybody running. But you do need
like I imagine the person who's like, I'm going to use Blood Crushers and the Blood Throne, and I'm like, oh boy.
yeah, Blood Throne. Yeah, wait on Korn's new book for sure.
Right.
I'd really like to use Fiends, but I just can't see how to make them work.
Right. That's another great example. I mean, and you just mentioned something that's really interesting about the nature of this army. Because it is a soup army, effectively composed of 5 different books, it's going to be very susceptible. It's an open army, not a closed army, right? We've talked about the difference between open and closed design before. It's an open design army where, when we got the new Nurgle book, suddenly things changed. As we just talked, we kind of mentioned the Guo thing earlier. We'll talk about later, right? But like when Khorne eventually gets a new book, as we all hope it does sometime soon, it could flip the script completely around on what Khorne units end up being valid, valuable, useful here, right? It is entirely dependent on what's underneath it, right? Of those 5 books underneath it. The foundation of it will change.
To me, that's the awesome part. Like
Right.
it's we get a book like 5 times as often as anyone else does.
Sure.
My one concern, though, what I'm seeing with the Nurgle book and what I've seen with some of the Slaanesh stuff is that they are changing some war scrolls to bring allegiance abilities into the war scroll. So like all this stuff on the scroll for like the Guo where he does disease points, where the Beast of Nurgle do disease points, that does us no good.
Right.
But they're pointed for that. Most of the Slaanesh models are pointed to take advantage of the exploding 6s, which we're not.
Or they're summoning, which you're not going to get.
Exactly.
Sort of
and there's this sort of reduction of the allegiance abilities to scrolls, which I don't like. And it's we just have to accept that we're just not going to be able to use this ability. Is it worth using, even if we can't use that ability? But then I'm also starting to see this trend, especially with the points hike in the Guo, that a lot of these greater demons, I think I'm getting the vibe. They're wanting them to be over 400 points. They don't
Yep.
want them to be allyable.
Right.
That they won't be able to be allied into other armies. And so it's going to end up making our big greater demon power pieces that much more expensive. Right now, the Bloodthirsters, you can get the Boom BT, the Insensate Rage one for 280, and that's just insanely cheap for that thing. So I could see him taking it to 400, but I would expect this an equally strong War Scroll to equal 400.
Yeah, sure.
So he may still be usable.
Yeah, I mean, one would hope that they move all the greater demons to between 400 and 500 points and have them punch at that weight. That's where they should all be. Like, I've read on this rant before. It's insane to me that we've ever let greater demons get to that point, but here we are. Okay. Here's my last question. You mentioned this. So this was obviously in its old form. It was Legion of Chaos Ascendant, right? And some people still sort of will occasionally call it that, but it's really not anymore. Legion of the First Prince was like a sub-allegiance of Loka, right? But now it's just Legion of the First Prince. And so Bellacor's basically always here. Okay? Like, this is his army. He is the First Prince. This is his thing, right? Is it a problem that the army is pinned to this one named guy, right? And it's not that you would absolutely have to have him. You certainly can build a list without him. It's just like, you read the allegiance abilities and you're like, okay, I get it. Take Be'lakor, right? Like, he feels like a much more essential part of the army vis-a-vis how the army functions than I think any other sort of character or hero exists in the game. So what do you think, Sean? Is that a challenge? Is it fine? Because if people want a sort of just mixed demon thing, they can do that, but then they still have to hew that. They still have to be, sort of tack their sail to Bellacor's wind, as it were, right?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about Tyler's. What he would say if he rolled up on a table playing an LFP list and there was no Be'lakor. How would you feel?
I mean, that would seem a little odd.
Would you feel that like, yay, I hit the jackpot? I don't have to.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, from a gameplay standpoint, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, like I've just kind of gotten accustomed to Be'lakor and what he does in the game. Like ultimately, I think he plays a very useful role in the game. Yeah. Despite the challenges that he can present, particularly when combined with other elements. But yeah, I mean, the whole narrative structure of it is really centered around Be'lakor, obviously. But I mean, I could see them opening it up where you could go down maybe two routes where like you have to play a greater demon, or maybe you have to have a greater demon as a general,
or a demon prince of some kind, or a
demon prince.
Yeah,
totally. Yep. And I think that could still make sense.
Yeah, where you like a White Dwarf update where you demon print or a greater demon becomes a lieutenant or something, and you get some kind of
right.
But Vince, I think your question is actually, of course you can run it without Be'lakor, but I would the way I look at Bellacor's scroll as model, why aren't you running him in every Chaos Army anyway? Because he's 360 points,
sure, and
his ability to lock down a unit, just say no to a unit for one, if not 2 turns when you plan it right, and it makes the double so fun, right? It makes priority that much more fun for your opponent. They're like, oh no, are they going to double me? Because they have to think, do I want to take the turn for the double, but then my unit's Be'lakor for a second turn, or do I want to give them the double and then have them free next time, or give it to them? So it's this extra game involved. I think he needs. Personally, when I make Nurgle lists, when I make Zeech lists, I put Be'lakor in. Because I think he brings so much power, especially when you've got units of 15 bow snakes, you've got god monsters running around, these single units that people are relying on to do a lot of work, and you take them off the table for 2 out of 5 rounds, that's 40% of the game that they're not.
Yeah,
they might not be doing something.
And let's be honest, it's the more vital part of usually what's happening, right? Like that 40% is an outsized 40%, right? Yeah,
it's usually 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 when it really matters. And, and so. And then when you put him in Legion, you just get all these extra stuff. So I'm like, of course I'd run him in Legion. But then wait, I also get this, and I get this, and he's a platform. That was the best change from Legion of the Chaos Ascendant to the Be'lakor book, as far as I'm concerned, to the First Prince. Because in Legion of Chaos Ascendant, he could not be a summoning platform. He did not have the keywords, and he was just running around as Undivided, and you couldn't use him for the within 12 summon. And now he can bring in anything. So what I like to do with Bellicor, either auto run him 20, or if he's in combat, because he's so tanky, he's usually on his top bracket, and so he can just retreat 14. So auto run him 20, and then a unit of, say, 5 paints wholly within 12. You've got a 32-inch range where you're popping
Yeah.
models out.
Right.
And it's just like, this is all mine. And each of those models has a 3-inch bubble around it where unless you fly, you can't move, and you certainly can't land. And
Yeah.
so when you talk about control, you've got Bellicor's scroll itself, which is locking a unit down, but then you have ability to just dominate the board. And it's just so strong. That's why, taking the so-called control list route, I think you're just doubling down on something you're already doing well. And I would much rather go into something that's going to give me more combat, give me more of a tanky, or either make me more tanky or make me more aggressive, in order to compensate for what I'm not getting in the army generally.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one thought on that. In our game, I realized that sometimes early on in 3.0, I was falling into the trap of just automatically giving my opponent first turn when I have the choice. Because you play for the double, blah, blah, blah. And against Legion, I'm quickly like, oh, I probably should have thought about this against Sean. And on this mission, I think we were playing like First Blood, and you took control of 2 objectives. Like big time. You did exactly that. Bellicor moved up 5 pink cores. You had 10 pink cores on the other one. You had everybody screened off. Kairos, boom, Thirster. You made a really nice play to use Kairos's dice change to deny me the battle tactic of I think I had to get Conquer or something. Maybe you anyway. It was just like one of those things. Yeah, so you got to think about against Legion. Maybe you should go first and try to pin them if you have the means to try to pin them back in their deployment zone. I was very impressed by how well you controlled that game from the get-go.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But that's
good.
I was just going to say that the priority at the first turn. So Legion is an interesting army that you don't care if you go first or second. And because of that, I've actually upped my drops because I want to be able to see where the opponent's going to counter drop.
Sure.
Most folks are coming in with 1 anyway, but I usually have one of the lists you'll see. I tend to have Bellicor, and then I've loved the 3 Bloodthirster list. That's my current thing. I just love it. And so I'll have a Thirster here, and the one with the 5-up aura here. So all of them are wholly within 8. And so I wait to see if they deploy. Well, which side do I want to go strong off Bellicor? Do I want to go strong off Bellicor to the left or strong off Bellicor to the right? And if then they can decide to go first or second, and it really doesn't bother me. Yeah, I go first. I dominate the board. I move up. I do my monsters, the ferocious advance. If they give me, if they go first, then I've got a potential double, and then I can possibly double them from 2 into 3. And then you've got the burning objectives, which makes it so much fun. I love letting them double me from 2 to 3, having something Bellicor 2 to 3, and getting the choice to either burn or keep an objective, because sometimes keeping an objective is even more important, not letting them burn, because you want to be able to go and cap it later or to make them keep something on that objective. If you burn it, they're just going to start scooting. And so you make them stay there, knowing that Bellicor can go 14 inches from a retreat and get 5 bodies on there later.
Nice. Nice. All right. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's an interesting case, right? Because this is such a distinct and strange army. I think honestly, if I had my choice, like you're not wrong that Bellicor is a very powerful piece in the current world. Like, I don't think he's auto-include in all of the other Chaos armies. Although I certainly do often run him in Slaanesh, just that's a statement on, like, what are you sacrificing, It's like, well, I lose 360 points of something bad to get 360 points of something good, so, it's can only go up from here. But, I think that he is an interesting tonic to the sort of malady of the current meta, right? In that I don't think he's auto-include, but he has high value. He sits in this really interesting space where his ability is potent and useful often, but not overpowered. It's actually writing almost a perfect line, I think, in how it functionally interacts with the game. Which is, it was overpowered when it was on like a 200 and some point model.
He's sure.
It's
Yeah.
much better on a 368 point model, right? I think honestly he should be like, I think when he came out he was 380 and then they knocked him down a few points, whatever. I think 380 is probably a better number for him. Still keep him reliable, but he should be a little bit higher because I do think he is a potent piece, but that's neither here nor there. I would love to see this army have a generic option as well, just so people weren't. There is a cohort of people, and it's completely understandable, that just aren't as enamored of named characters, right? And like the ability to sort of bring their own flavor to the army, and I think that's, by the way, completely justified, right? Like there's this, ultimately your army's your thing. So if and I think in most armies you kind of have this. You do have the choice, right? Between, usually it's like, well, a named guy in the lead or the generic version of him. That's often the case. Not always. There's no generic Kragnos out there, but whatever. You get what I mean.
Thankfully.
Yes. Like with this kind of guy, I'd love to see that there's some ability to just like slot a Demon Prince in or something like that, where he can absorb most of the same abilities. Because I don't think it would break the world in any way that I could see. Yes, you'd have the ability to sort of soup him up in some way, right? But like, I don't think it's going to bring I don't think it's going to bring about the dominance of Legion of the First Prince or something, right? It would just kind of expand the play space for people who want to make those armies. So
yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah, like I said, Sean, having these lieutenant demon princes that kind of like the equivalent mount traits or something that they get access to. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, like, and I think that would just be. I think that would just be a way, like, it would make the army more interesting to more people, which is good. While still, like, take nothing, add more options. There you go, right?
Yeah, like they've got the Exalted Greater Demons in 40k, do something like that. And Be'lakor, I mean, I know some folks have sort of discounted his new scroll. His damage is awesome. People are always surprised by the damage he does. He's 8 attacks, 3s and 3s, -2, straight 2 damage, not D3. And then he's got a 3s and 3s, 1 attack, 3s and 3s, -1, 2 damage. And then another attack that's 2s and 2s, -3, 2 damage. So the dude can put out some work. He could do 20 wounds. And I think people sort of, they have this idea that, well, you don't have to worry about him. He's not going to do anything, but he can do some work.
Yeah, he's almost always rerolling hits as well from his little ability, the first damn Prince ability.
If you get the one of each of those in. But yeah, I mean, I've done that in the past, getting one of each of the battle line types.
Is it required each?
Yeah, it's harder to get him in rerolling hits, but nonetheless, he's obviously he's a very scary guy if he goes all out attack and stuff like that. He's perfectly acceptable on damage. Like he's not striking down the hardest anvils in the game, but he can do work if you let him. He's very fast, and so and he is, as you said, tough. So he can get into the sort of a lot of fights and come out the winner, right? Even if he's not killing it all at once. Okay, let's look at the rules themselves. All right, let's go ahead and timestamp this because this feels like a good change. All right, so
we've been talking for 50 minutes. Goodness, it's flown by.
Time flies. All right, so this is your traits with Legion of the First Prince. But you can find these rules in case you're curious. By the way, if you're not sure where are these rules, I don't see any battle tome called Legion of the First Prince. Those rules would be right here in this tome. It bears the name of the guy, Be'lakor. So it's the Broken Realms book, and it's a good book. It's got a good, cool story, and it's got rules in it for other armies as well. Obviously, if you're a Nighthawk player or something, you should also be checking that out. Okay, so all right. David Heron says, when I started, Bloodthirsters cost 1,000 points, 995. Oh yeah. I remember playing against Bloodthirsters very often back in like 4th and 5th edition, when they would immediately just fly high on me, and that was always fun when they would come down with their like 10 strength 10 attacks or whatever nonsense they did at weapon skill 10. Okay. Anyways, back to this. So your traits. The first damn Prince, which is
just really
quick.
Watch,
go ahead.
Oh, before you go, you can also find these on the Warhammer app, the Age of Sigmar app.
Yes.
But it's under expansions. So you need to go to the rules, go to expansions, and then you'll see Be'lakor.
There you go. Have you ever seen National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation?
Hmm.
Okay. all I can think of here is when they go to the Hoover Dam with a naming structure like that. It's like all the damn pictures you want. So, at any rate, this is an ability that the first part of which you will probably not use super often. It will happen sometimes. It's not something you should like. You shouldn't make bad tactical decisions to make this happen. That's what I'll say. If you can do it incidentally and still be in a strong place, fine. But it allows him to reroll hits when he has one friendly unit of Bloodletters, Horrors, Plague Bearers, and Daemonettes. He's got to have one of each. At least one of each. He can have more, but at least one of each. So there has to be at least these 4 units within 18 inches of him. Not wholly within, just within. So somebody's got to be towing into that pretty generous bubble. The trick is you're not always going to really have cause to take all 4 of those. You might achieve it more with summons, something like that. So, at any rate, don't bend over backwards for this. It's not worth it. Just all-out attack, hitting on 2s is generally fine. You'll get there. It's okay. Just getting reroll hits on him, not super worth it. Fair, Sean?
Yeah. I think I've done it once, maybe twice in the games I've played over the past year or so. But I would also point out that all these rules, the Bloodletters, Demonettes, Plague Bearers, and what are they? Horrors. Those are no longer bolded. They used to be bold in Legion of Chaos Ascended. So you could do Blood Crushers, you could do Seekers, all those things that had the keywords. Of course, now Plague Bearers are host of Plague Bearers, or what's the?
They're like Plague Bearer host, but it still says like Plague Bearers.
So these are only the main battle line. Those are the only all these rules. Those are the only things that apply.
Yeah, I am sad about that because I used to use the old version of the Cursed Skies. Like I played this army a few times in its old form, and I I've played every army, man. I have all the Chaos armies, so
I would expect nothing less. Yeah, you own all the models, play them.
Yeah, exactly. When you own every Chaos army, you're going to be like, well, let me give this a try a few times. But I used it to get back because the Chariots had the Daemonette keyword, so I was using the Curse Guys to return back broken
you were that guy.
Chariots. I am that guy. It was super fun. At any rate, no, you can't do that anymore, so there we go. Okay. In addition, our favorite 2 words in all of Warhammer, and this is going to be what... this is going to lead to a whole discussion in a little while. So
this is where the clicks are going to come from. This is the bait right here. Be ready for it. Oh.
Yeah. Before you allocate a wound or mortal wound to Be'lakor, pick one friendly unit within 9 inches of him from one of the following War Scrolls and roll a dice, Bloodletters, Horrors, Plague Bearers, Daemon. It's basically the same for Battle Line Demon units. On a 4+, that wound or mortal wound is allocated to that unit instead. What we would colloquially call, but has no place in the rules, a bodyguard effect, right? So he can pass wounds off to the little demons, which of course makes sense. So there you go. Okay. So, and yes, Smorgan's in the chat talking about he was defending the Blood Throne. Smorgan, you're a madman. I want you to know that. I love you, buddy. And as he says, yes, acquiescence and all-out attack is just generally a lot easier to achieve, and it will get you to basically the same place. So yes, I agree. And because there are many Slaanesh models, as we'll talk about, can actually find a very good home here. So that's nice.
Yep. And actually, if you want to run Khorne, this is the place to run Khorne.
Yeah, at the moment, there's at least 2 of those 4 books probably find their best use for their scrolls in this army. Maybe I need to start flipping over to, instead of trying to play Slaanesh and bang my head against a wall, just run some Loth and just use like a bunch of Slaanesh demons. That's the part of the army I like, anyways. All right, and I can get my old ward save back I used to have in past editions. Won't that be fun? Okay. So, we'll talk about the bodyguard thing in excruciating detail in just a little while, don't worry. But I'm excited about it. The Cursed Skies. At the end of the Battle Shock phase, if Be'lakor is your general and on the battlefield, roll a dice for each friendly unit on the battlefield from the following War Scrolls. Same people again, but also adding Furies, which is fun. I love that Furies actually have a use in this army, and I was so excited when you sent me some lists. We're going to review some lists that have Furies in them, because I've always thought that they had play, they just didn't have the right list to go in, and I think that here in Loth they actually can have a home.
I agree. In LFP they do belong here, and they're awesome. They're a powerhouse unit, I think. I am a little miffed though that Furies are here, but they're not in the allocation role.
Yeah, that
possibilities.
you can't pass wounds to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that upsets me. So,
Yep. It's strange. It feels like they should be, but hey, well, okay. At any rate, you could return D3 slain models to that unit. If it's a horror, you get one. So, okay, cool.
yeah. And the D3 really helps for things like the Plague Bears and the Furies because they're 2 wounds apiece.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Like getting back D3 Plague Bearers, good. is good. And then everybody has the next rule is Infernal Realm Walkers. Everybody has a 6-up ward. So, okay. There you go. Easy enough. And that can be modified, as we'll talk about. And then finally, Unyielding Legions. At the end of your movement phase, you can pick one friendly legion of the first prince hero that is on the battlefield and roll 3d6. On a 10+, you get one of the following units added to the battlefield, to your army. And then it's derivative of the heroes keyword, and Bellicor can pick any of them or 6 Furies. So there you go.
Absolutely amazing ability. And the Pink's War Scroll, I'm just a super Pink stan. I love them. They're all that I bring in. Five models, which so they can be strung out. You don't have to worry about coherency garbage. They become 10 models, and then so everything else when it gets hit starts shrinking in model size. And of course, Pinks go up, and then they sustain, and then they drop.
Right.
Plus, they're the only thing you can bring out that you can then shoot with, because they're going to be outside of 9, 12-inch attack or 12-inch range on their shot. Throwing 18 shots for something you just summoned for free and chipping something down before you move into it is really, really nice. Really nice.
Yeah, I mean, 5 horrors, let's be honest, is still summoning 25 wounds. Right? Like, that's the real... by the way, the Nurgle is now 20 wounds. Let's not underestimate that either, right?
True.
So, there you go.
It's just that the number of models for objective purposes are going to start doing. They're going to drop.
Down. Yep. Whereas somebody then hits the horrors and they actually count as more people on the objective.
And just a quick story about that, Vince. I was playing Nurgle. This happened twice playing Nurgle now, so I want to make sure you mention it. I was competing over an objective, and I had owned the objective. They came in, they were going to take it, and then disease rolls at the battle shock phase, baby. And guess what happened? Those little Pinks go and they become 2 blues apiece. And look, you didn't take it from me. Or my favorite was, oh, now we're tied. You didn't take it from me. So those extra wounds on the Pinks.
Contagion, that's a must, not a can rule, that it must happen.
Fun times. Take that, Nurgle. All right, so that's the basic rules of the army. So, it's obviously focused on a lot of the battle line demons now, in a lot of its interactions. But that is to say, like, the basic 4. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about the sort of other stuff. Because this army, as you said, does not have a lot of rules to it. It is... Once you've sort of got the expertise that you can go through and kind of understand, how do I look through all this? Where do I look? Once you're not a new player, the army does direct you to some good degree as to the kinds of things you're going to want to include. And it's not that much to learn, right? So yeah, there you go. Okay.
Just really quick, I'd like to respond to Michael Warner in the chat, who's talking about as soon as they get popped, they become 6. That's true, but once they get popped, then you've got 2 that come in, and you can put those in within an inch.
Right.
So you can play around with coherency to make sure they're still in coherency. But that is a good thing to think about. That you are going to be a unit of 6 when you get popped, but you do have ways to play around that.
Yeah, you have to think about how your sort of triangles are set up there, because you could end up in a bad place, because the Pinks are on 32 mil bases. So you want to kind of be in the 32 mil. Sneaky coherent line where once one pops, it doesn't matter, you're still going to be in coherency, but it's a good shout. All right, so everybody who is a wizard in a Loth army gets this spell in addition to any other spell they know, which is the Master's Command, which basically gives them a death frenzy. Simplest way I can say it. They can fight on death. So, fine. Cool spell.
I very rarely use it.
Right. It's, it does what it does. You don't have a lot of, like, units that you're swinging around that are super melee powerhouses that you really care that much about, but it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't like things that are reactive to my opponent. Like in order for me to get
Sure,
something,
sure,
you have
sure.
got to do this. And I don't want to lose a piece. So yeah.
Yep. Um, all right. Rather than read all of the command traits and artifacts, Sean, what are we picking here? What are we picking?
Um, well, so whenever I was running in Legion of Chaos Ascendant, when we could bring the Vermin Lords and I could pop something, a Vermin Lord within 6, I was bringing an Infernal Charge because I wanted to get that charge off.
Okay.
Then I was playing Primordial Commander a little bit. And I'm like, oh, this is cool, but it's still a random roll, and 9 is better than 10. I think 10 is like a 66% chance, and then is a 73 or something percent chance.
Mm-hmm.
But still, you can miss that. And 66 is pretty good. The only one that I will ever take is Ruinosaur because people were freaking out about a 5+ ward save on a relic or an artifact you could give anyone. And now we just get it for everybody wholly within 8. We get a 5+. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think Ruinous Aura is just the pick here. It can lead you. The only thing I will say is that abilities like this that want to encourage you to castle, you have to be careful you don't play yourself out of the game. What I mean by that is like people can become addicted to having the 5+ ward instead of the 6+ and will make bad choices in their movement. Like they'll try to stay too tightly clustered, right? To suddenly like move around in this little pack. And then they're not actually doing what this army does well, which is spread out and control the objectives and control the battlefield and establish that board presence. And so it's good. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's a very strong trait. You just have to break your brains want to be like, oh, I always want my toy that I took, right? I always want to make sure that every roll I make ever always gets the 5+. Like, no. It's there for you're protecting your core. Don't get overly addicted to it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and that's why units like the Mask with her innate 4+ ward,
Sure.
and the Epitome's 2+ mortal ward, those are really good because you can peel them off and not be too concerned about them being out of the 5. I tend to say, what are the key pieces I want to keep when I do the BTs? I'll usually run them together as a hunting pack of 3, make sure that they're within 8, so they get that off the general. One of them will be the general. Try to keep Be'lakor in at the beginning. Deployment, I always have my heroes. Be'lakor, Blue Scribes, whatever. They're all in the 8. For top of one shooting, that sort of thing. But then being able to, Be'lakor he's going to take a hit. I've seen him take 2 Terrorgeist on and just be like, so he'll survive. Especially if you've got pinks there that can take 50 wounds for him. Because you have to do that shrug, by the way. You cannot. It's a must.
Right.
And so you cannot say, oh, well, I don't want to do that. I want to keep that unit of pinks alive. You have to have enough wounds there. You could kill. I've seen people kill their own battle line unit off because they had to do it, even though they might not have wanted to do it.
Sure. Artifacts. I think we all know the pact or the choice here, right? Sorry, the item here that we're leaning on. But what do you like?
It's the banner, baby. Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, that's just the silliest thing I've ever seen.
They did such a good job with all this other stuff. Apart from only giving you one spell, but like all this other stuff is really good, and then we get to the final one and it just fall off a cliff.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, the first two both have some interesting, but it all comes down to number 1 for me.
Yeah, I think the Fourfold Blade is probably the one. Actually, I'm going to scratch that, Vince. The first one that I will take is Arcane Tome.
Sure. But
and I will
of
put
the
it on
ones
the
here,
Bloodthirster.
yes, that's fine.
Be'lakor Bloodthirster with an Arcane Tome. Oh, narrative be damned. But I would say of these, the Fourfold Blade, if you have a unit it might be a little contingent. If you have a unit that's got a lot of hits, you're going to want to put a lot of attacks, put the Fourfold Blade. If you have something though that's you want to get in combat and you want it to survive, it's going to be Armor of the Pact. The thing about this army, its biggest, from my experience, the biggest things you have to worry about is long range shooting and long range mortals from spells.
Yep.
And so of these, the Armor of the Pack, it's not going to be my first choice. If I'm taking a Warlord Battalion and I get a second artifact, I may take Armor of the Pact. But it's not going to be usually my first choice. If I'm looking for sheer output, it'll be the Fourfold Blade, probably on the Epitome, or a bunch of Nurglings now. which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the artifacts are interesting because I agree with you. Like it's it looks like this on a chart, right? Like it's like good, slightly worse, but still interesting, and then falls like a rock on the third one, right? In my estimation. Like the Armor of the Pact, if you don't have somebody who has the attacks to make the fourfold blade worth it, the Armor of the Pact is a really good choice. It's one. I mean, reroll saves is almost completely eliminated from the game at this point. So anything that's still doing it is very powerful. Yeah, it should be entirely. I agree. Yeah. Like this should be struck in an FAQ from existence.
Yeah. I know,
but
this artifact pisses Tyler off a lot. I know.
Absolutely.
I like, but it is really strong.
But it is only melee.
What's that? It is only melee. Sure.
So all the shooting. I mean, I've had stuff with Armor of the Pact get shot off.
Sure, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's at least that. But yes, I'm just generally of belief that right now, in our current world of save stacking, all reroll saves should be snapped out of existence, like you own the Infinity Gauntlet. Okay, but nonetheless, I think Fourfold Blade is my favorite one because I like doing damage, so that's cool. And there are, like, we'll talk about the various heroes that make it interesting, but I think both of those have play. So cool. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about them hottest chaos demons. Not yet. We're almost there.
Oh, all right. I'm going to start playing it when we get there.
That's fine. We'll get there. All right. These are hot picks. Hot picks for the army. So here's my hero list. Okay. Be'lakor, Kairos, the Demon Prince of Khorne, Bloodthirsters, the Contorted Epitome, the Blue Scribes, the Great Unclean One, and the Mask. These are my hot picks of potentials. These are all things you could see in a list. A competitive list. Troops, Plague Bearers, Horrors, Furies, Fleshhounds. Okay? Now, I didn't include Daemonettes or Bloodletters, but it doesn't matter. Like, you can also summon those because there are heroes that would summon both of those, as from the previous heroes we mentioned, if you absolutely needed to. Daemonettes are a perfectly fine summon because they have a built-in reroll to charge on the scroll. They're a horrible thing to put in your base army because they're so horrendously overcosted right now because you're paying for you're paying for the summoning and the abilities that they have and so on and so forth. Like, they're so just tragically overpriced. But as a summon where you're paying 0 points, they're quite good because they have built-in run and charge and built-in reroll charges. So even on the summon, if you need them to, like, you summon the unit, your only hope is to go run and charge and pin somebody on an objective or something like that. They can be a great way. They can be a great summon in that case because you're going to get 2 bites of the apple without burning a command point. So, cool. What did I miss? Who don't I have here?
Think about Screamers, Sean.
I think I'd rather have Furies.
Yeah.
For the points. Yeah. I mean, Screamers are beautiful against like an army like LRL where you just run over them and just dive bomb them with the D3 mortals. That's really great. But Furies just give you so much more options, especially charging them in and then jumping over 12 to get to that objective, which is really great. But also when they get into combat, if your opponent knows what they do and how much of a pain they are, then they have to use their first activation to kill them. And they're actually they don't have a save, but they're 2 wounds apiece. So, and they also have the 6 up after. So it's kind of surprising how long they'll last, especially
how many
12.
You're summoning with you're getting 6 on the 9 or 10 up on 3d6?
You are, but I would never summon Furies. I would always bring them in the list.
Okay.
And I would do probably, unit of 6 if I've got the points, but I usually do units of 12 if I'm going heavy Furies. Because I want them there at the beginning because I want to be able to move them forward and then try to get a charge or have them do a screen to bounce off of in combat. And I also like to put them behind the Fleshhounds so that whenever the Fleshhounds get charged, or Seekers are great actually for this too, because Seekers are in battle lines, so you're going to give away broken legs. So when the Seekers get charged, the Furies are in combat because they're within 3 inches, and then you just bounce them over somewhere. Yeah.
I'm seeing some other shouts in the comments here. Sinessa. I could see Sinessa. I think Sinessa is actually an interesting pick. I'm remiss for not including my favorite new Slaanesh model, new sculpt. So I could see Sinessa absolutely. spell has interesting play in the current one and has effectively an unlimited range. She brings a lot of her own stuff with her on scroll, which is useful.
Yeah, I know that Tyler's a big Sinessa fan. He's been uh, pushing her really. I think that she suffers from the same thing as Kairos does in some ways because there's a lot of not a lot, but there is enough auto unbinds in the meta that when you're relying on somebody to do one spell, and Kairos can flip a dice, but doesn't have any pluses to cast, and so you have things like Scions of the Storm where they can bring in an incanter and just drop them within 30 to get that auto unbind. A Teclis moves up and he auto unbinds. It can really ruin your day as a player to be relying on that one spell and not be able to get it off. But she does have a lot of she's sort of a tool that you can use, but I'm kind of hesitant to put her in there just because I've seen her get shut down.
Sure. All right. We've got some shout outs for some other we've got a couple Slaanesh fans in the chat, which I'm excited to see. Talking about the Bladebringer Herald on Exalted Chariot. Or let's see, the Infernal and Rapturous for the sort of magic control off of that. What do you think about those two picks? People trying to shove some Slaanesh in here, I think.
I love the Bladebringer Herald on Exalted Chariot. And I know that Paperboy J has created a wonderful, beautifully painted Slaanesh army. And so he gets to use his toys. And they're great. So especially when you give them the fourfold blade and send them in there, they can do the D3 on the charge and then make a monster they can stop. And I mean, there's all kinds of different things that they can do. So I think that's a good call. The Enrapturous, not so sure. Doesn't she have something on her War Scroll still that gives depravity?
No, I believe they got rid of it. So
they did. Okay.
I haven't run her in a long time. Is my honest answer because she fell off the list of worth it in Slaanesh pretty hard.
Yeah, she looks cool. I mean, she's a good looking model.
Beautiful model.
I think the one thing that I kind of want to talk about real quick is the Demon Prince.
Sure.
Because I have a relationship with the Demon Prince.
Okay.
I have never run a Khorne Demon Prince. And I will not run a Khorne Demon Prince. So I know that there's a couple reasons. One, I know a lot of people think it's no fun to play against. And I agree. When you're playing a melee army and you come against a Khorne Demon Prince and you have runs, you have charges, you're like, I came in here to smash my models against each other and you're not letting me do that. But for me...
I mean, I get that. I don't know. Maybe it's the Stockholm Syndrome that's been going on over the past year playing this stupid War Scroll. But I feel like it does have a role in the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Iron Jaws that are doing what they're doing. If we're going to have this level of intense mobility and DPS, damage output. Anyway, I kind of feel like it has a role in the ecosystem, but I get what you're saying in general.
Well, that's not I think you're right, Tyler. That in certain Legion of the First Prince lists, you have to put him in there because you don't have the other tools to deal with it. But the way that I look at this army, whenever I look at any army, is I say, what does it do really well? Like, what's the book designed for it to do really well? And Legion of the First Prince, from what my experience is it's designed to take a hit. It's got the ward, which can be a 5-up ward. It's got the pinks, right? You've got all these bodies. It can take an alpha strike. It can take a hit really well. You move up the board, you summon in something that's your screen, and you take that hit, right? So I already have a way. I'm already really good at taking that hit. What am I not good at? So I'm kind of I'm putting I'm doubling down on what I'm already good at. When I could be putting in more damage from more thirsters, or I could be putting in more bodies for more screens. I mean, there's a lot for objective control. There's a lot that I think that, and also it does no good against shooting armies or ranged mortal armies. Like if you're not going against a melee army, the Khorne Demon Prince is going to sit there and look pretty, and that's about it because he really can't do much else. And whenever you go to an event, it's a 3-game or 5-game event. If I knew I was going to be facing 5 melee armies, I would absolutely include him. But in this meta, I don't know. So to me, there's other ways I would like to go with those points.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And the main thing that I hate about him is the range is too long. It's too big of a bubble. I think they need to knock that down to it's within 18 right now, or wholly within 18.
It's 18,
knock that down to Yeah, knock that down to 12. I think he'd be a lot more reasonable in regard to Bloodslit Ground. But anyway, I mean, it's kind of first principles. It's a silly rule for a Khorne Demon Prince of all things to have that rule. But we've talked about that before. But no, yeah, good points, man.
I mean, the insulting part is that all the demon princes are still the same points cost.
Right.
when it's so obviously evident there is a huge performance difference between them.
It kind of seems like blood slick ground should get you to the enemy quicker, right? Like you're sliding on the blood slick ground to the enemy instead of stopping them. Yeah.
That would make a little more sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a couple other ones here that got mentioned. There's been some people angry with us for not including Slobbity Biopiper because of his ability to sort of buff Plague Bearers, like as a little power pair, effectively, right? How do you like that as a sort of power pair in there?
I mean, yeah, if you go Nurgle, if you're bringing in Nurgle stuff, then Sloppity would work well. I mean, you've got so many options here, and like you see my list, you'll see my 3 battle line. Like I have a 3 set battle line I play, and there's a reason for that. And so I would never personally bring in Sloppity, but I could see him behind a unit of 10 or unit of 20 Plague Bearers, and being a real pain actually.
Gotcha. And then the last one we'll touch on, Scarbrand. People asking about big bad Papa Scarbrand. How you feeling about him?
Oh, this is tricky. I mean, just his scroll by itself is so awesome and upsetting at the same time. It's just because. So we've got this great command ability in Gird, lets you fight your top bracket, which is going to suck for him.
Sure.
It's like you need him to take enough damage to where he does damage, but not enough damage to where he dies. And you need to try to balance. It's like the worst parts of the Khorne book, right? The accounting to 11, and you've got to okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to fit this? And I don't know. With him, I would much rather take those points and just have a Bloodthirster and Sensei Rage.
Okay.
Because I mean, you have to hold Scarbrand away for a turn. Because once he doesn't attack for a round, right? Then he gets to
then he
go
goes
in at low
incandescent,
profile.
yeah.
But you're telling me that I can't use something for a whole turn, like in the combat phase? I just don't like it. I wish the scroll was tweaked. I don't know how to tweak it, but I just wish it was tweaked.
Okay. All right. Cool. Good stuff.
So
there may be some other units. I'd be interested to see what else people think. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say
the last.
Go ahead, Tyler.
The last one, Karanak, I think he's 45 more than Fleshhounds. He summons in Fleshhounds for free.
Yeah.
You see him popping up at all?
I ran him.
Karanak. Yeah.
I love him too. I've got him over there on the desk, and I mean, I've ran him. The problem is the way his scroll is worded is, he has to be within 9 of his prey, and his dogs have to pop out. I think it's like outside of 9 of an enemy, but within 9 of him, and they pop out in the hero phase, which means you spend a whole turn getting him within range, but not in combat because you don't want him to die because you want to bring in your dogs. And so it's like there's just if it was at the end of the movement phase, you're like, bam, move there, done. Now I can charge with him. Yeah. It makes so much more sense. But the way the scroll is currently worded, it's just awkward and just doesn't feel right.
Sure.
Totally fair.
Okay.
But I will say the Blue Scribes are an amazing unit. Like, don't sleep on the Blue Scribes.
Yeah, they're on my list. Oh, absolutely.
Oh man, and the not just the 2+ unbindable for the Mystic Shield or the Lifestorm. You take first turn shooting, pop Lifestorm. You're doing D3 or 3D3 because they're not in combat. But his ability to just 16 inches, maybe 22 with the auto run, and then 12 inches pinks. Turn him into a monster. You got 5 bodies on an objective. He's just so good. And also the Savage Spearhead with a monster. Him and Bellicor, turn him into a monster, run him up to those battle plans where it's got only the 11-inch territory. It's just he's really, really good.
Nice. All right. Well, I think it's time, Sean. Here we go. Okay.
Ooh.
It's time for the great debate. Here we go. So, I need to mark this down. All right.
I want to tell you, Vince, I don't think you realize how stressed out this may be the last few days.
Oh, you shouldn't be stressed out. It's perfectly fine. We're going to talk about Bellicor and wounds. Turns out that the bodyguarding and the nature of ward saves and versus vis-a-vis bodyguarding has still not been clarified. Multiple attempts at doing this, all of which have clearly failed. Sean is going to discuss the way that he sees this resolved, and then I will rebut. But I will say that I think we would all be served, and Sean, I think this is probably a point of agreement we could stand with, is we would all love to, because I know different places in the world rule this differently, and it is a very important rule for this army. I think we would all be served by a good FAQ that just clearly spelled out in very concrete terms how these things worked. Stop giving these one-word answers off of one example and just write out the rules for how you want this to work. It's evident that they are aware there's different cases. Please give us a good FAQ. Is that a fair point of agreement to start?
I am totally with you on that one. Clarity is the most important thing here.
Absolutely. Because it's messy right now. But let's hear both sides of the discussion. So, Sean, take us through this. Let's start with your first slide here, which is FAQ 14.3 on wards.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so first off, hope nobody goes to sleep because this wall text. I wanted to do it where it was a enter on click type of thing, but it didn't work out that way. So we'll get through this together, I promise. And this issue isn't only just for the Legion of the First Prince. This is something that affects multiple armies. It affects Soul Blight. It affects LRL. And anything where there's a ward and there's also an allocation roll. This is important to think about. And I've had this conversation so many times, not only in the LFP Discord, but at events. I have talk about this with TOs beforehand. I talk about it with opponents. They're like, "Oh, well," and I was like, "Well, here's what the rules say." And it's one of those things where people might not like what way the rule is now, but there's a lot of rules that I don't like. But hopefully we can get some clarity on this. But based on the way the rules currently are now, this is the interpretation that I and others in the LFP community have adopted. So when you look at FAQ 14.3 on wards, and this is from the latest FAQ update in December 21st, 2021. So there's two questions in that section about wards. The first one, as you can see here, question one, if a player makes a successful dice roll to negate a wound or mortal wound. Okay, so there's a negation roll here, which is a ward roll. And this triggers an effect that forces a wound or mortal wound to be allocated to a different unit. Allocated to a different unit can then attempt made to negate that wound. So what it's basically saying here is, if my ward ends up giving you a wound bounce back, like in Archaon Scroll,
yep,
can you negate that bounce back wound from the ward? So they said, of course, no, because this could cause an infinite loop with certain war scrolls. And so anytime that you get a bounce back, like for instance, I think it's Ograt in the Nurgle book that has the sixes wars.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
a bounce back.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so you're just going to take that, even if you have and you get that wound from a ward, you're just going to take it. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
So this question though does not count for LFP. That has nothing to do with Legion of the First Prince, because we don't do bounce back mortals on ward rolls. So that's
it's important to note that if you attack someone with LFP and they bounce back a wound on you, that you're not going to get your ward, but exactly. It's not relevant to you, like, other than that. So if you go in and attack, I think Great Unclean ones have the same thing, where if their disgusting resilient roll is a 6, you take a mortal wound back. You don't get your ward roll against that bounce back.
And it was actually really sad, because I was like, hit Ograt, I got a 6, and I was like, what? Wait, all right, I'll just take the wound. That's how that feels. And so the second question here. So some abilities allow you to roll a dice to attempt to negate a wound or mortal wound, but that roll will have a different effect depending on the score of the dice. And the ability that they're citing here is the Praetor Scroll, which has a D3, 3 different versions, right? 3 things happen based on the D3 of the roll. So when one of those options is a roll, when one of those D3 options is a ward, is that roll considered a ward roll? They said yes. Anything that has an option in it that is a ward, where there's a ward as an option in that roll, is a ward roll. So again, this is not applicable to Legion of the First Prince, because we don't have anything that has these differentiations, right? It's either you make the roll or you don't make the roll for the ward. It's a ward here, it's a bodyguard here, it's something else here. So that does not affect us at all. And what's really key is the bottom of this. So remember the first FAQ they put out for 3.0, where they had that sentence in there that said, bodyguard rolls are ward rolls. Right. And that is gone. So they removed that completely. It is no longer in the FAQ. And so the fact that they intentionally remove that, if you're talking about rules as intended, that tells me that there is a clear intent to separate what we consider to be bodyguard roles, what I refer to as allocation roles, because that's the term they use, and ward roles. So those two are just two distinct things. They're no longer combined within the FAQ. Sir, next slide, please. Any questions on this?
Nope.
Vince,
good so far. I'm going to let you go. I'm not interjecting
Tyler?
in the middle. Tyler, if you've got thoughts, go ahead.
Oh, man.
I'm sure the audience will appreciate it.
Yeah, well,
hear me talk.
Doom and Darkness tuned in.
You tuned in right at the right time. We're in the middle of an Oxford debate, Doom, so don't worry. This is going to get deep. This is the deep part of the show. Stay with us.
This is almost as bad as comps. All right. So second one. So the allegiance abilities in question here. The first day in Prince we talked about. This is the second part, the in addition. So in addition, before you allocate a wound or mortal wound, pick one friendly unit within 9. We already discussed this. And on a 4+, that wound is allocated. And then we have Infernal Realm Walkers. You can roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to friendly to the first Prince unit. On a 6+, that wound or mortal wound is negated. So these are two distinct abilities with two distinct purposes. When you look at First Name Prince, the important words to think about here are the allocated in the bottom, right? So on a 4+, that wound or mortal wound is allocated to that unit. Mm-hmm. So the word allocate, a dictionary definition of allocate, is to distribute or assign. Right? Infernal Realm Walkers, when you look at the last sentence, it says that wound is negated. So negate, dictionary definition again, to nullify. Right? So these are two distinct words with two distinct meanings. And so if we could get the next slide, please. Is that all clear for everybody?
All good so
everybody
far?
In the chat good? Okay, excellent.
Let's talk about the unappreciated allocation step.
Really feel like I'm in class right now. This is awesome.
No, this is good. It's good.
Okay, so the unappreciated allocation step.
John, you're doing a great job with this, by the way, but this is why when you came up to me at our one day that I was so glad to see you show up too. I just told you, do whatever the hell you think is right, my friends.
This is a tangled rules mess. I mean, the fact that you have to make this series of slides says why we need a clear FAQ. Yeah. But okay, go ahead.
Well, and Tyler, I don't remember that. If I would have remembered that, things might have gone differently. I'm like, sweet, let's take his card and get some drinks. All right, so the unappreciated allocation step. So I wanted to point out the abilities on other scrolls. So what I'm saying here is that GW has inserted this allocation phase in the wound process. So normally, whenever you take a wound, you roll an armor save, right? You roll your armor save, and then the save is unsuccessful, the wound goes through. That is, we normally conflate that with allocation. Of course, it's going to go to this unit, right? So those have just always been conflated together. What GW has done is they have started to separate that from the armor save and where does the wound go, and they've only done it in very discrete ways on scrolls and allegiance abilities. So you see with Egomaniac, here's an example of, this is the new one from the Cruel Boys War Scroll, it's a command trait. And in this, it says, roll a dice before you allocate a wound or mortal wound. Again, the word allocate, not negate. Before you allocate a wound, or instead of making a ward roll for this general. So they've obviously separated the two out, right? You have the allocation and you have the ward. On a 4+, pick one other friendly unit within 3. That wound is allocated to that unit and cannot be negated. Right, so they have specifically said the allocation happens and there can be no negation. So it seems very clear within this rule that they have separated allocating and negating into two different things.
Yep.
If we look at the Necromancer Undead Minions, on the scroll he has an allocation roll where wounds or mortal wounds allocated to a friendly summonable unit within 3 on a 3+. So there's nowhere in the wording of a Necromancer that it says those wounds once allocated cannot be negated. So the way I would read this is that they go to the zombies, and then the zombies could have a 6 up after Deathless, because there has not been awards that yet. That roll is an allocation roll, because it's not a ward roll. The Venari Blade Lord's Guardian is a very similar thing on a 2+. Again, no mention that wards are not allowed once allocated. And then I think the most telling one is Manfred's scroll, where he says the first wound or mortal wound allocated to this model in each phase is negated. So here we have allegation and negation specifically combined. When you allocate this wound, it is then negated. So again, we've got these two different terms that are being used and being drawn into two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to see how many people have stopped watching.
No, no,
Next,
you're good.
please.
You're good. We're getting deep into it. All right, so that leads us to this sort of how it works in practice, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Bellicor takes a wound. Let's call it a normal wound for the moment. He of course gets his armor save, which is, going to be a 4+ because it's an ethereal type armor save. But let's assume we bypass that. So now we're on to the next steps, right?
hmm Yeah. So, and again, it's key here is that Vince, you and I are in agreement that there's only one ward per wound. Like
Yes.
there's no ambiguity about that.
Nope.
And the core rules 14.3 on wards does say only ward roll is made before. So this is important to point out, unless otherwise stated, the ward roll is made before the wound is allocated. So the unless otherwise stated, I think, is very important because as we saw with the allegiance abilities, all these things are happening. The allocation roll is happening before it's allocated. And so we've got this breakdown here. I'm going to mine. Wounds and mortal wounds come into Bellicor. If they're just a wound, he's going to get a 4+ armor save, which is ethereal. And then anything that goes through, he will get a 4+ allocation roll, which we consider bodyguard, but I'm using allocation because they're using the term
Sure.
allocate.
That's the clear term they use there. So yeah.
Yeah. So a 4+ allocation roll to a demon unit within 9 inches of those 4 we talked about. If it's a successful allocation roll, now you've decided where that wound is going. So you know it's going to go to this battle line unit. There has not been a ward rolled for that yet. You just know where the wound is going to go. And so now you're going to have a 6+ ward from Infernal Realmwalkers or a 5+ if they're within a Ruinous Aura. If he's not successful with his 4+ allocation roll, then Bellicor will have the 6+ or the 5+ ward roll. And so again, there's this distinction between allocation and between negation. And ultimately, the most important thing, and I think it was actually cut off of the slide that you had to transfer over, Vince.
Yeah,
is
it's just
core
it's a good final statement to close on. I knew you'd speak to it.
Yeah. Core rule 1.6 on abilities and effects says if an effect of an ability contradicts a core rule, then the effect takes precedent. So, and A Broken Rose Bellicor came out right before 3.0. They had everything worked out. They knew what they were going to do with that. The Soulblight Gravelord's book with this issue 2 came out prior to 3.0. So these are allegiance abilities and these are war scroll abilities. So they would supersede any sort of core, if there is ambiguity in the core rules, which I don't think there was ambiguity. But that is my argument, sir.
Yeah.
That's good. Vince, one thing I was thinking, could you try to summarize your interpretation in a nutshell of your understanding of John's argument before we move on to your rebuttal?
Of course. So my summary of your argument, please tell me if I misstate any facts, would be that when worded correctly, there is effectively a distinction between what we would colloquially and traditionally, but has no rules meaning, call a bodyguard effect, which is really an allocation of where the wound goes. But because of the change in the removal, as it were, of sorts, of the previous entry that bodyguards just simply equal ward rolls, now we have officially broken these into 2 different steps, and so both can apply under the right conditions, in which where text wouldn't otherwise forbid, i.e. something like the egomaniac you had cited, which, already the text is in there that's clearly forbidding it. Text which speaks to their knowledge of the difference between the 2.
Yeah, and
Is that a fair
what
summation?
I think that's a good summation, and I would like GW to put an allocation rule section in the core rules, but I think that they've showed us enough of what their understanding is through these different areas.
All right, very good. Okay, it's very well put together. I think you have an incredibly good grounding for your argument here. So let me just state before I rebut that I do not think that in any way that you are off in Fantasyland here. I think you have an extremely good base you're standing on. All right. Hey, I haven't said it yet, but if you like that we occasionally delve deep into these rules or not, hit that like button and subscribe. What a great time to remember to mention this. If you're still here, hit like. Because sometimes we will go deep into stuff because it's worth a good discussion. Okay, my rebuttal. My rebuttal is this. the December 2021 errata updated the 14.3 section with this paragraph. Words replace the paragraph with the following. So this replaces literally says that what they're saying here is replace the core rules 14.3 with the following paragraph. Some abilities allow you to roll a dice to negate a wound or mortal wound. Abilities of this type are referred to as wards, and the dice roll is referred to as a ward roll. Unless stated otherwise, the ward roll is made before the wound is allocated to the model in question. Up to one ward roll can be made for each wound or mortal wound. If the ward roll is successful, the wound or mortal wound is negated. Okay. So, this clearly limits wards to one roll for the wound, regardless of who's making it. It's clear as a bell. One ward roll for each wound or mortal wound. Which, again, is not a point of disagreement between Sean and I. Sean's point is that there is this other thing called an allocation roll, right? That is happening before this. And that's not in the rules right now, a ward roll. Okay?
Oh.
And, go ahead.
I would push back and say that it's in Bellacor's rules, but I'll wait until.
Sure, no, that's fine. So, a roll made with for this Be'lakor sequence to work, a roll made with a variable outcome like Praetor's is a ward roll. That we have a clear answer to. Okay? Now, variable doesn't mean anything within the core game rules. That's not a game term. I would argue, as I did to Sean through when we were talking about this before text, that in fact, all word rolls are variable rolls. So since we have to rely on the English language here, would you say that the result of a D6 is a variable thing? Just not tying to these rules.
I would say there is you have a variable outcomes when you roll a D6.
Okay, thank you. Hence, all word rolls are variable. I am making a bit of a jump there, but nonetheless, there we go. The interesting thing about the Praetors is that a lot of the wording is very similar to what Be'lakor does. Now, that is to say, like, yada, 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 you allocate a wound or mortal wound to that hero instead of... the difference is they have the thing here that says instead of making a ward roll for that wound or mortal wound that would be allocated, you can roll a dice. Like, this does have the updated text of instead of making a word roll, right? Clearly implying it that it is meant to be the word roll. Okay. Even though nowhere on this ability until that FAQ did they say this is a word roll. It obviously only negates. The negation only gets triggered on the 5 or 6. Right? Because on a 1 or 2 it remains in the hero. On a 3 or 4 it goes to the Praetors. So, but it's saying it's a word roll. What that means is if you have Hammers of Sigmar Praetors, and they roll a 3 or 4 to take the wound onto themselves, they don't get their ward roll. They don't get their Hammer's ward roll.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all agree on that. Yes?
Yep. Yeah, you can't double it up because this takes the place. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because they have said this is a ward roll. Right? Even though at this point we haven't invoked any negation clause. Right? We've only allocated up to this point. Like, I've followed this chain and never triggered a negation clause yet. Now,
but you haven't allocated either because allocation is on the 3 and 4.
I understand.
So allocation is wrapped up. Yeah.
I got it. Yeah. I've gone through, that's what I'm saying. Like, I've gone through all this. I never negated anything, but I did not get a ward roll. Right?
Well, you won't get this is the ward roll. So you're not. So whatever happens here, you're not also going to be like if you ended up rolling the 1 to 2 where it goes on the hero, or you end up rolling the 3 to 4 where it's only allocated. You're not going to get your ward roll as well because they've FAQ'd this because the ward's part of it. It is a ward roll.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm just saying I didn't hit the word. I followed that entire life cycle of that wound or mortal wound, and I never hit the word negate.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nowhere in all of the text I read, right, did I hit the word negate. Now, given negate is hidden down in 5 and 6, right? Like, no disagreement there. Okay? So that was a potential outcome of what happened here. Right? But I still burnt my ward roll without ever invoking a negation clause in this case because I rolled a 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all agree with that, and have cut off all of my abilities to access the ward roll functionality. Okay, cool. All right. So this thing in specific is a ward roll because of two factors. Somewhere in the text it says the word negate, right? And or it says this replaces your ward roll. They wouldn't actually have to invoke the negate clause at all, right? If they just said, instead of making a ward roll, this thing happens, we could probably rightly assume that this is meant to be the word roll. Right? Like, imagine if the Praetor scroll was 1 to 2, it stays on the hero, 3 to 6. In our imaginary hypothetical world, it just gets allocated to the Praetors. Like, get rid of the 5 and 6 completely. If they kept the text that said, instead of making a ward roll, this thing triggers, it would seem to me it's still a ward roll and I wouldn't get my follow-up save. Okay? I wouldn't get my follow-up ward, sorry. Okay? That's my hypothetical. Now, obviously, I have no, that is to say, there's no hard rule to that. But my hypothetical is, if they include the text, instead of making a word roll, do this thing, they're telling me this is, instead of doing word rolls, this is taking that place. Okay. A roll made with a normal bodyguard, just an allocation, effectively, right, that doesn't have the additive text of either being variable in some way. It's not variable. We can't hinge it on variable because every roll is variable in some way, and you could have 100 different permutations of what variable is. The fact that I have 2 outcomes versus 3 outcome does not a variable outcome make by English definition. Okay, there is no such, I could turn left or right, that's a variable outcome. If I have left, right, and straight, that's a variable outcome. They're both variable. So it's not that word. Okay. It can't be the word negate, as I just displayed, because I don't need that word. I don't need to invoke negate to get at word roll. So it has to be this other third thing, this additive text that's instructing me, hey, instead of making a word roll, this is what I'm supposed to do, or something like that. Okay? Because if it was just variable or just negate, something like I have, where it's my little example is down here, which is this is not a word. Each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to the bootmaster, roll a die on a result of 2+. This wound is allocated instead to any boopity within 3 inches. Not a word. But if it was just the variability that they were answering in the question, then each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to bootmaster, roll a dice on a result of 2+, roll an additional dice. If that die is a 2+, the wound is allocated instead to any boopity within 3 inches. I would have suddenly magically, even though I had just nothing really changed about the functionality of the rule, right? Other than this slight additive text I'd added, right? I just magically transmuted that into a ward if it's only variability we're hanging our hat on. And that's obviously nonsense. Okay? No part of that would make sense. No part of us, no rational human would read the first one and go, definitely not a ward, and then read the second one and go, no, but that one is definitely a ward. Right? That variability alone can't be what we're hanging our hat on. Okay? So, my argument right now, okay, is that you are probably right by Raw because this text doesn't appear. Okay? But my argument is rules as intended by everything we see in current books and what this seems to want to be implying up in 14.3 but is bad at, is that they're trying to get this down to one roll past the armor save. And they're very poor at doing this. Okay? The intention of the rule, especially when I look at the new Cruel Boys rewritten thing, is that no, they want one. They want one roll. That new Cruel Boys thing supports your argument in that you can say, well, my text doesn't say that. Yeah, I agree. Your text doesn't say any of that. No disagreement. That's prima facie obvious, right? But what it tells me is this is the model, and they're just being too lazy to go back and rewrite all of these things into the expanded text. And if just literally them forgetting to put, instead of making a ward roll, because that's it. That's what we've come to. That's the magic words. right? That's the what do you say to open a door? I don't know, whatever Aladdin says, right? That's what it is. Okay?
Abracadabra.
Yeah, whatever. Whatever. Without those magic words, we've somehow transmuted this exactly identical ability into a non-word roll. That's clearly a fluke of rules writing. Like, that's just bad text. And the rules as intended are clear, which is you get one roll. Now, that's where I come down.
Okay, so Sean, I think you're muted.
No, he's just thinking.
No, I'm just being very
Okay.
thoughtful.
He was just in thought.
I'm
Okay,
waiting
so-
for my time to speak.
Here you go. I have concluded my rebuttal. By all means, please.
What would be your attempt at summarizing Vince's rebuttal?
My attempt is
It's your
my attempt at
understanding of-
summarizing Vince's rebuttal would be. Man, it was come out. I'm not trying to be. I
You can
understand
be
that,
flippant.
that
It's okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
I only
sure.
want one roll after the armor save. that's what that was breaking down to, I think. And
I would
can
say
see, I can-
GW wants one roll after the armor save and is clearly pushing in that direction.
and I would argue. So first off, intent is very difficult to prove.
Of course.
It's very difficult to prove.
Arguing
and
Rye
if-
is always the hard road.
Yeah. And if we're arguing intent, I would say the explicit removal of the bodyguards equals wards from the FAQ is the biggest sort of sign of intent. And the fact that they're using the words allocate and negate in these various different places shows me pretty much that there is an intent to have two different things. If they're wanting to collapse everything into a single post armor roll, then why didn't they just FAQ the Legion of the First Prince ability for Be'lakor to a 4+ ward? They had two chances to do that since the book came out, and with major FAQs, and they chose not to. And there's other instances in various armies in LRL, Soulblight, where this is the case, and they have consistently chose not to. And the Cruel Boys command ability, I think, is actually really telling. It is the exception that proves the rule. It's not, this is what they really want. It's, this shows that they specifically said you can't do this thing because that thing is happening elsewhere. It's basically a nerf that they gave Cruel Boys. I don't know why they did it, but they decided to. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. It's another role that some people are like, why'd I have to deal with another role? But that's the rules as they are. I mean, and TOs are going to rule this any way they want, right? I mean, that's the thing. Is that a TO runs their event, they can do whatever they want to do. But from the way that myself and others who have thought probably way too much about this, spent way too much brain power on it, that needs to be up front at the beginning in the pack. And there's other things that, I mean, why not make Morathi's command ability melee only, right? Why not make sure LRL has to have line of sight? Like, there's so many other things, other rules that we don't like that we play by because they're in the rules. It just seems to me that this is pretty clear, that there's negate and there's allocate. There's rules in Legion of the First Prince that deal with both of them together. There's rules elsewhere that deal with both of them separate and together. And it seems pretty clear that this is what they're wanting.
Okay. I will agree with you that intention is hard to ascribe. And so if it doesn't work for me, it would also not work for you, is what I'll say there. So negating both of our appeals to intention, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
I think we can leave this because I don't want to make this the whole show. But I would hang my final hat, since it's my show. I get the last little point on this. Ha. I would hang my final hat on the idea that I put no stock in them not updating rules or answering questions. We could pick 1,000 instances of where they forgot, didn't write things right, took 3 FAQs. I mean, it took 5 shots at the Sylvaneth Wildwoods to get them correct. And then they still forgot rules on there. I wouldn't ascribe intention that they thought, oh, Sylvaneth aren't supposed to teleport because this was their 4th time fixing the Wildwoods and they forgot to teleport. Right? Yeah. So, like, this kind of thing is simply a messy rules area, and they don't like going back, as they have proven multiple times, and updating slews of old war scrolls with massive amounts of new text. They just figure, it's not a big deal, we'll wait till the book comes out. Now, all that being said, I will, as I said, I think you stand on firmer ground, Raw. I agree. And so my advice to anyone playing this army would be talk to your TO, exactly as Sean said. Understand how your TO views this rule, how they're going to interpret it, because the final thing that I think we both agree on in a big way is how this plays will have a big effect on your army and what it does and what it's capable of doing, and you should be understanding how your tournament is going to rule it and play accordingly. So
yeah, definitely. And I'm going to let you have the last word, Vince. You've got it. I just want to thank you for letting us have this discussion, because this is the biggest issue for the people with play this army. They come to it. I mean, this is all that's in the chat all the time. It's like, we're having this discussion again because there's so much ambiguity. So many different regions are doing differently. So hopefully, if anything, this show, if anybody at GW does watch, please clarify this. Just so we
yes,
know
indeed.
what
The thing we can both agree on without a doubt. Okay.
So yeah, just to be on brand, I think John is right on Raw and Vince is right on rules as intended.
Taking that middle ground. Nope, that's fine. I would agree with you. That's the problem. At any rate. Okay.
I'm here to be helpful, guys.
Yeah, no thanks. All right, let's get into some lists. So here we go. Let's leave that deep rules well behind, and go to some fun times, which is some lists. All right, so these were all provided by Sean. Let's drop that heat. Talk about the units that are going to be here. Boom! Coming up first, we have your very first list. I don't know if I put these in the order you sent them to me in or not. But so the first list is Be'lakor, Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, Kairos, the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, 5 Flesh Hounds, 10 Pink Horrors of Tzeentch with an Emerald Life Swarm and an Umbral Spell Portal with as much of this as you can wrapped up into a Battle Reg. Take us through this bad boy right here.
Tyler, you want to talk about your experience with this list? this is what I played at Flying Monkey.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, very strong list.
Yeah.
Put away, man. Yeah, it was solid.
Yeah.
I did have one. Sorry, one thing. You don't have to answer right now, but I'm curious about your experience with this list and lists in general with LFP. I'll try to be good, and we'll stop I do love Vince's version though. The how you've been finding 4+ objective missions. We talk all the time about power per square inch. A lot of missions are 3 objectives. You can burn a lot of them to where you go down to 2 objectives. This army can, at least with the control direction of the army, if you lean into that, it can really benefit from that orientation. Yeah, I'm curious how you found 4, 5, 6 objectives with this army.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let me break down the army real quick, and then I'll definitely get to that because I think it plays differently based on the missions. So Be'lakor, of course, and this one I brought the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, who's on a 6 to wound does 4 mortals to everything with an 8, and so that's you got to get him past the hit gate, so 4s to hit. But the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster really helps with that because he does have the Holy Within 16 Khorne Demon it's a command ability in the combat phase. Of course, all of Khorne's stack in basically the combat phase. But he friendly Khorne Demon Holy Within 16 can reroll hits. So he's going to be giving that out to the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. You're rerolling those 5 attacks, looking for 4s. Once you get past the hit gate of a 4, you've got a wound gate of a 2, which is pretty easy to get by. And he can just do some serious damage. Every time I put him in a list, he's the most targeted unit. And that is wonderful because I get to know where they're going to go for. And so whenever they see that Boomthirster out there, that Insensate Rage, it always gravitates. The enemy always gravitates. The opponent. This is a game. Always gravitates towards that model. And Kairos, of course, he's great because he's got the mortal wound spell through the spell portal. He's going to do 6 mortals. What I like to do with Kairos, so Kairos was basically there. When I made this list, I said, what's the meta look like? And I need to deal with shooting. So Kairos was my answer to shooting, of course, popping, sending it 36 inches with the spell portal. I'm sorry, 30, it's 18 inches, another 36 inches with the spell portal. And being able to kill one of those bow snakes, one of those raptors popping in a spawn, making them attack it. They're not going to kill it. There's a lot of play you need to do with that spawn though, because the wording of it is you place the spawn wholly within 3 inches of the unit, and then they pull. So you really need to balance out. Do I want to make sure I keep the spawn in combat because they could always pull out to where he's not in combat anymore? And so you need to decide what you're going to do with that. Keeping a shooting unit in combat is really important because then they have to shoot into it. What I've also done with that spawn though is if they don't have shooting I need to worry about, I've popped it into a battle line unit in the front. There was a game I remember against FEC. I think Adam's in the chat. He's one of a really great FEC player locally. But I put it in his battle line, and then I retreated it out. And when I retreated out of his battle line, because it comes out of the hero phase, so it can still move. When I retreated out on 2d6 move, that blocked his Terrorgeist because he can't land within 3, right? So you really have a 7-inch or 8-inch sort of radius of a circle where you said, no, you cannot go here. So again, you've got the control without having to do, the demon prints and all that other stuff. But I think it's so the chaos spawns are a really interesting option to use in this list. And then of course Kairos has the flip one of the dice, which is really clutch. I tend to forget it. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's hard to remember unless I write myself a note to do that. And then the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster. Oh, I love this guy so much. Actually, he's been superseded by my most recent favorite Bloodthirster. We'll get to that soon. But he's the general. He's got the Ruinosaurus who's broadcasting the 8-up. And again, in deployment, I would have Kairos in the back, Wrath, Boom, and Be'lakor, all of them with an 8. But he's got that arcane tome. So on his scroll, the wording of his scroll is really important. He has this ability where it says, this unit can unbind one spell in the enemy hero phase. In addition, unbinds for this unit are +2 or something, or this unit gets +2 to unbinds. And he's not a wizard. So when you give him arcane tome, you now have 2 unbinds at +2. So you can actually have a chance, and I've done this before. I have unbound Kairos because they can only max at 12, right? But you do have that +2, so it does give you that extra legs to get over some of those spell doms, and you've got 2 of them, which is really nice. And then the flaming weapon on his axe, he's got 6 attacks, D3 +1 damage. It's pretty nice. It can add up to some serious work. -2 rend. And then the flesh hounds. So we've got my usual deployment is the pinks up in front. They're going to keep up with Be'lakor because you can't be guaranteed you're going. So as the player, I can't be guaranteed I'm going to make a summons. As the opponent, you should always play that I'm going to make a summons. That's just like what you should always think of. And the best way to play against Legion of the First Prince with summoning is to screen throughout the entire game, because I have to come in outside of 9. And so most folks are really good at screening when they're deployment, but as you're moving, you need to be thinking, where's my outside of 9 space? Where is he? Where is this opponent going to be able to bring in their summons? I did have a really interesting game. I don't think the Zeech player I played tried to do this, but I ended up moving Be'lakor up, and I got my summon off, and I'm like, I can't bring in anything. This totally sucks because I was blocked out. I just couldn't bring in a unit of 5 pinks because everything was within. I didn't have any space. But in deployment, I would usually do, because I play against Stormclass a lot of deep striking. I usually have the Flesh Hounds on the side, and I'll of course measure 9 inches at least. If they're bringing something like Annihilators, those bases are pretty solid. I'll measure 10 or 11 inches out. I know they can't get a unit back there. And I'll screen the black field with the hounds, screen the back field with the hounds, have the pinks here, and there's some variation of that. But yeah, the hounds are always screening the backfield, and then it's harder for them to get broken ranks that way, and I can then have them to run later on in the game up the board if I need them to.
Right. Yeah, with those bases on the Flesh Hounds, we've been seeing that since, the Legions of Nagash days with the Dire Wolves. You've got a classic footprint set up there for your deployment. Yeah, zoning out a lot of space, particularly with those 2x5 Flesh Hounds. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, those poor wolves with unit of 10. The 5 is great. The 5 will take up some space.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, let's get to list 2.
Just really quick. So Tyler's question about the 6 objectives.
Yeah, 4 to 6. Yeah.
Yeah. So the only one that I've had a real problem with this list, and I think it was at Flying Monkey. I ended up winning that game anyway, but it was the one where Battle Line have objectives secured. That is not fun with this list. But it is nice when you can take a unit of 5 horrors up there against the non-battle line and just say, 5 Flesh Hounds and say it's mine. But yeah, it was kind of tricky with that because all the summoning units don't count as battle line because they didn't get that list creation. So you need to be a little more careful with. I think Savage Gains is my most favorite mission in the whole GHB. It was more so when they didn't have it where you could score 2 on both.
Double
I liked
up,
it better.
yeah.
Of course. When it was designed correctly, yes, and they FAQ'd it wrong. Yep, you're right.
Exactly. But it's a great mission. It's also a great mission to teach people on, I think, because it really forces them to start thinking about defensively as well as power projecting. Like you need to hold this because it's worth 4. But with this one, it's run up the middle, find their weak side, run up that side, swing a little bit that side, have the pinks go up. And then you can always bring the bloodthirsters over here to this objective if they stay there. But you can get something on their back objective turn 1. Actually, so turn 1, I was playing a Stormcast list, and one of the guys here, Jesse, who ended up actually being the last game for Great Plains Masters, the Invitational. He's a really good Stormcast player. But he was running Yanastra, and he had her back on his 4, and then he had a unit of 5. And I summoned in a unit of horrors, made the 9-inch charge. I had a unit of 5 summoned horrors on his back objective. They got popped. I took it, top of 1.
Oh, wow.
And that's 4 points.
Yeah.
And so for the rest of the game, he's trying to get his back while trying to get mine. And of course, when he gets it back, it only counts for 1 anyway. So just the ability to move, and that's again the Demon Prince. He's taking points, but I'm putting those points in thirsters. They only go 10 inches. But we'll see how we deal with that later. But the ability to just move up the board and just say this space is mine is super powerful. And to me, that's the control in this army.
Interesting. So nice. I didn't quite. So I mean, in general, is your sense that in your experience, you can still do pretty well on 4, 5, 6 objective missions with the way that you've been playing this army?
Yeah, I have to pick what objectives I'm not going to go for. I mean, so and all these missions, like the 6 objective ones, and the burning and everything really makes it kind of tricky. But you have to say, okay, if I get priority in turn 3 and I give it away, what am I going to burn? And I need to start thinking about that turn 1. Like I have to write off that one on the back left. Right, I'm not going to go there. That's just not going to be an option to me. Or in one of the 3s, the mission with the 3 in the middle, I look at the deployment and I say, okay, where are the 2 that I'm dealing with? Because there's no point in never holding a 3rd. And so what are the 2 I'm putting bodies on? And what's the one that I want to fight over? I think the thing that cost me the 2 points in my game against Joe, which again was a great game, but like I said, he had all those Phoenix guys here with their saves and their wards. And I said, well, I'm just going to split the difference. He can't move off of it in time, but I couldn't get here in time. And that's what cost me. So yeah, I think that you've got to strategize ahead and say, what's my victory? You can't hold them all, and you don't want to hold them all. There's really no mission, I think, where, other than Savage Gains at the start of round 1, where you want to get something over here to get that extra 2.
Right.
In most games, last question, Vince, we move on. In most games, so obviously in deployment, sorry,
killing me. Keep going.
In most games, are you finding that obviously in a deployment you're keeping, I would suspect, the big pieces together within the whole 8? You tend to find as the games go on, that tends to be the case, or are you splitting them up more often than not? Like in our game, you mostly had them together. Round 3, I think the Bloodthirster came out a little bit, but I'm just kind of curious in terms of how that tends to play out.
Yeah, when it comes to Thirsters, I tend to keep them together. The reason that the Corn, giving them a 5+ just totally changes that unit. It's insane how much the unit changes with that 5+ after. But I'm willing to peel Bellicor off as long as he's got something to allocate to. But yeah, normally the power block is kind of hunting, like a school of sharks.
Okay, cool.
Nice. All right. Next up, we've got Bellicor, the Blue Scribes, and the Contorted Epitome in our leader block. So very different looking leader block. And this time we've got 5 Fleshhounds, 5 Fleshhounds, 10 Pink Horrors, 12 Furies, 12 Furies, and a Soul Grinder. That's right. The Soul Grinder in the house. With the Emerald Life Swarm, the Soul Scream Bridge, and the Burning Head. With, again, as much as we can, wrapped up into a Battle Ridge. Okay. Which is basically everything in this list, because this list actually fits into the 1-drop really nicely because of the Soul Grinder being a behemoth. All right, so So obviously this is your one drop build out, and this does use the fourfold blade on the contorted epitome, where its 9 attacks can supplement that fourfold blade very well. Classic fourfold blade holder because 2 up against mortals. / very fast model zipping around the board at 12 inches, and then makes a lot of attacks and can really do some surprising work. Okay, so take us through this bad boy.
All right. Well, just real quick, Vince. Before I do, I'd like to mention in the chat. Someone's talk about Kairos, the importance of Kairos. The reason I moved away from Kairos is because of the ability to, like I said, auto deny, and I've whiffed on that spell. And also the 6 mortals isn't going to get you a spawn all the time, especially when you go against Gargants, right? 6 mortals is kind of like you're kicking them in the knee.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so there's just a lot of things where I was like, Kairos might not be the best way to go on this. He's still a good piece, but if he gets denied or doesn't get that spell off, he's kind of just a big body that sits there. He's not going to do anything beyond that. So this list, this is just kind of I don't want to say it's a fun list, but I'm going to dominate the board, just take control, and I'm going to make you kind of beat me up. And Be'lakor is the general, and very rarely will I run him as a general, but this does allow him to bring back the D3 at each battle shock phase on a 3-up. So he's going to be doing that with the Flesh Hounds, but he's going to be doing that with the Furies, and that's the key point here, is that you're going to have 2 units of 12 Furies, which until you play with Furies, especially a block of 12, I don't think you realize how amazing these little buggers are. They're awesome. They're 4s and 3, 2 attacks apiece, 4s and 3s, -1 rend, 1 damage on their profile. No save to speak of, but they can hit if you want them to, but of course you don't necessarily want them to. So you get them in combat, you cower instead of, when you activate them, you cower instead of fight, and you just take them back 4 inches. And they sit there, and you've got this other mobile screen. Or they're here on the objective on this side, you're in combat, and you jump them to the other side of the objective within 6. I still hold it. I'm not in combat anymore.
Right.
And you just make them kind of chase you around. And it's kind of infuriating, I'm sure, for the opponent. But it's also really, really fun as a player because anytime you can move, like to me, movement wins games. I'm of the opinion that you can win a game of Age of Sigmar without killing a single enemy unit. And movement is what wins games. And anytime you can move outside of the movement phase, is amazing. And so Furies, I think, if people haven't tried them in a game, proxy something. I do want to bring this up. This is a little tricky. They're in the Warcry Chaotic Beast box, and they come on with 32 mils in that. But the base size FAQ is 25 mils.
Right.
And so for most tournaments, TOs are going to go by the base size FAQ. So just keep that in mind if you want to check it with your TO first before you build them. But I end up shifting mine to 25s, which is actually better because you can get more in when you attack. And yeah, it actually works. And you can string them, and they're still within an inch of 2.
They run in charge, Sean?
They don't run in charge.
So 12 inches?
The 12-inch move, yeah, and then you're charging them after that. I've also, in other lists, I've put them in a Vanguard battalion because they don't have a leader. So they are contingent on someone else giving them the command point. So the 12 is actually really awesome for rally, but you're going to have to move something like the Blue Scribes in within range for that. But the Vanguard battalion will give you that free 6-inch run without needing to issue it or spending a command. So they can take advantage of that without a leader. So you can do the 18-inch, and then they can bounce off.
And you said that, so if you do not, when they activate is when they can get out of dodge, is when they activate?
Whenever you choose them to activate. So you've got to be really careful that if you want to move them, that has to be, like, if they're in combat, that's usually my first activation. Or I go somewhere else and I make the opponent have to activate if they want to kill them and they don't want to deal with them anymore. Right. Which is actually kind of nice because I'm like, well, it's your choice. And I'll tell people that too. I'm like, I always like broadcast what they could do. Don't forget you could do this.
Sure. No, 100%. This is because obviously with Skaven, their heroes can all scurry away where they leave combat, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is the classic conundrum where you put your opponent into making a decision they don't want to make. Like that's the beauty of it, right? They thought they were doing they in their mind they were going to be able to do X. Oh, I'm not going to fight this little piddle unit. I'll fight the thing I want to fight that's more dangerous. But of course, you do that, then the little piddle unit's just going to leave. and then you're going to be dealing with them again and again and again. Yep.
Yep. And what I love about the Bellacore as the general is that happens if they're in combat or not. So, and it's my battle shock, your battle shock. So you did some damage. You got to chew through 24 wounds with a 6 up set after, and then I'm going to bring back D3 on I think it's a 3 up. So it's they're a pain. They're a real pain. You can't do that, of course. Bellacore's general ability on the pink horrors, but you're not gonna. In the Soul Grinder is just a really fun piece. He's got a huge base, which means you add 3 inches to that base, and it's a whole no-go territory, right? Unless they get into combat. Unless they fly, you're blocking off movement in that zone as well. He can run and shoot, and so he's really there to be able to transform the epitome into a monster and get your 1 more VP from running 3.
Yeah.
Which and what I tend to do in my games, I was looking at the scores that I've done.
It's notable, by the way. Let me just jump in. The Soul Grinder can run and shoot. So when you run 3, he can still do a shooting attack. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Exactly.
A lot of people probably aren't familiar with the Soul Grinder's rules because who uses Soul Grinders? So and like he can double dip into that battle tactic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And plus with the epitomes. Acquiescence, overwhelming acquiescence, it's D3, rerolling 1. And that's a 24-inch range spell. We're mostly used to 18-inch range spells. So usually if she's on the line, you're hitting the enemy's line because most of these are 18 inches away. And so our 22 inches when it's 11 for each deployment. But still, she's going to be able to, if you put her on the line, she's going to be able to get that spell onto something.
Acquiescence,
so she's going to be shooting
reroll 1s to hit?
Reroll 1s to hit, yep. It goes off on a 7 to cast. She can reroll casts. She used to be able to reroll unbinds and dispels. I'm not salty at all, GW.
Yeah. No, Slanesh is not allowed to have fun things. So that was immediately stricken from the record.
Exactly. But of my games, when I think of the scoring, I tend to get 30 points on these missions, 6, 6, 6, and 6 on the 5, all 5 rounds. And that's because I'm able to do these extra battle tactics with monsters. In this case, it's this. But with the BT list, I'm doing it with them. And so what I love about Legion of the First Prince is that you've got so many monster choices, whereas others don't have that many, or your KO, your boats aren't even monsters. So it's kind of like...
Yep. All right. Cool. Very nice. I like this version a lot. Good.
And the bridge, is that especially like for horrors, just to get them in place?
Yeah, the bridge is there to get the horrors up the board because then they can shoot. 33 horrors hitting on 5s, wounding on 4s, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s. I mean, they're just, people have kind of, I think, okay, I'll say, I have found people to be just surprised. They're not, they're the receiving end, right? They're not pleasantly surprised. They're just surprised at the amount of shooting that comes out of an LFP army, especially when you're summoning 5 pinks at a time, and you've got 2 bloodthirsters that are shooting. One's got 2 shooting attacks. The Wrath of Khorne has 2 shooting attacks. One's a D3 mortal wounds on a 2 up. You've got the all the pinks. I mean, you have a legit shooting phase in a Chaos Demon army by the time you get to round 3.
Cool. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about this one, the next one, which is all the Bloodthirsters, I think is what we're going to call this one. So, Bellacore, Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury, Blue Scribes, and the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, 5 Flesh Hounds, 10 Pink Horrors, 6 Furies, and the Emerald Life Swarm.
Yep.
So just all the Bloodthirsters. All right.
This is the list that's near and dear to my heart, because when I started playing Khorne Demons, I ran 4 Bloodthirster lists with the Unfettered Fury, and it was a lot of fun. And so this one, this has my new favorite Bloodthirster, well, my old favorite Bloodthirster, the Unfettered Fury. And this guy just gets, people don't think about this guy, and I don't know why I don't see him talked about more. 6-inch pylon is amazing. I mean, people have argued that, I've heard the argument that with redeploy, it doesn't matter. Those 6 Furies that I have there, those 6 Furies are going to go up and move behind you, and then you're going to burn your redeploy. Right. Sure. And then I've blocked you off. I mean, or you're going to redeploy from one Thirster, and then I'm going to have the other Thirsters come up. Right. So just the 6-inch pylon gives you so much. And until you use a 6-inch pylon regularly on games for a while, you don't realize it's a totally different movement phase. And it's shifted because it used to be towards the closest enemy model. Now it's towards the closest enemy unit. That is huge. That is just such a massive change, because you can just move 6 inches as long as you end closer to that enemy unit. So I've been able to, with those bloodthirsters that are on what it's like a 3-inch base in the middle. I've just jumped over screens and then done a 2-inch range.
Yeah,
axe
because they're on
attack.
an oval base, they can often do the whole
Oval.
like they can often
Yep.
Tokyo drift it sideways over a screen.
Mhm.
Yep.
And then you're hitting the hero in the back. And plus you can bring them in and you can zone them out and then bring in your other ones. So you've got so much play in it, and it allows you to run. Of course, you can run and then activate the 6-inch pylon. So you don't have a charge phase. You don't have to worry about a monstrous action like a roar or anything like that. You're going to lose your roar, which to me, I'm totally fine. I mean, I'm okay with not doing a monstrous action. But when you're surrounding a unit with 3 bloodthirsters, and they know they're going to pile in within 6 or pile in outside within 6 at the combat phase. And what I also like about it is you get to dictate what they're swinging back at. So you take that Boom Thirster, you give him the Mystic Shield, right? You give him Finest Hour. You make him the first thing that piles in 6.
Right.
Then they have to attack that buff guy, and then you can bring in the other 2. And there's been plenty of times where I'm like, okay, your activation. You don't have an activation, pile in 6.
Sure.
Because they don't have anything to swing with. It's very satisfying.
What's the bubble, Sean, for the range on the 6-inch pylon activation for any
Corn demons wholly within 16 inches, which counts for your
Yeah, it's a giant bubble.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's one of the few really. It's so funny because Korn is such a like ballet, careful, measured army, and then this guy, and I'm not surprised at all to hear you shouting the praise of this. Obviously, this got a lot of play back in the sort of days of when the Korn list of all the bloodthirsters together because of this, and it's just this one extremely generous command ability in the army where he's on a relatively larger base. The bloodthirster's actually on kind of a nice base. It's not too large, but it's not small. It's kind of like right in this middle zone of the perfect size base you'd want him to be on, where he can fit in unusual places. But also just it's so big off of him. It's crazy how much of the board you end up influencing with that base, with that command ability. Sorry.
And what you can do too, because that's an aura based on the core rules and the FAQ, you trigger that aura off of him because so he can't receive a command. He can't receive one because he's already given one. But things that are getting that benefit from him don't count as receiving command abilities.
Right.
So you can do the 6-inch pylon from him and do the reroll hits from the Wrath to the Rage. And so it's just you get, and then of course the Wrath on his War Scroll, he's rerolling hits against heroes and monsters anyway. So you can bring all 3 of these in and just you can just womp something pretty hard. What I love about the Fury too is that, and people they focus on the command ability, which is awesome. But he had so on a scroll he has in your hero phase roll a dice for unit wholly with an 8 on a 5-up, it takes immortal. Okay. But he also has in the enemy hero phase pick a unit within 3 inches, just pick it. That unit cannot retreat.
Right.
And that is super powerful. Like telling an enemy, nope, he's staying in combat with my 3 thirsters that are 6 inches, or you're not moving to go try to capture that objective, is just really, really strong.
Yep. Yep. All right. Last one and a fun one. Here we go to close us out. Bellicor, of course, as always. The Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. The Great Unclean One. That's right, with the Plague Flail and the Massive Bile Sword, the offensive kit, effectively. And we've given that 4-fold blade over to him. Now, is the Massive Bile Sword a 4-fold blade? No. In fact, all those little Nurglings are running behind him, picking this blade up. And then we've got the Blue Scribes and the Mask, 5 Flesh Hounds, 5 Flesh Hounds, 10 Pink Horrors, Life Swarm, and the Bridge. Wrapped up into a Battle Regen Warlord. As you mentioned, this is like, the much higher drops, but this army has the ability to not necessarily need to be super low drops. It can react well to that. So we mentioned the trick with because the little Nurglings have 15 attacks and it didn't get rolled as a mount or a crew or anything like that. Effectively, they can wield the 4-fold blade, giving you 15 attacks on a 5-up, doing D3 mortals. Truly disgusting what this Great Unclean One's going to come over here and do. Yes.
Yeah, and that's why you need the bridge in there. So and the bridge is he can fit within the space, and of course you've got the Blue Scribes to do the 2-up bridge cast because you do not want that to be inbound. And you're going to be able to get him up the board 18. So I stayed away from using the Guo when the book came out because I'm like, there's no way they're not going to FAQ that. Like, there's no way.
Sure.
And of course, they didn't. I shouldn't have been surprised. But what I like about this list is that the Guo, he might not get into combat. He goes 4 inches. I mean, a nuclear weapon is great to have, but if it just sits in your backyard, it's not doing you any good, right? If you don't have the ability to get it where you need it, you can say, hey, look what I got. This can do this much damage, but it's not doing that because it's not in combat. But what the Guo does is especially with many of those missions that have the 3 in the middle, is that he can just sit on an objective and just hold it, right? Just like come at me, bro. Take this objective from me. And people are going to stay away from that Guo, right? Especially when you intentionally place him and you say he does this. As even without the 4-fold blade, this dude smacks. And
he does real damage now, already. Yeah. And this turns him up to 11.
Yeah, and the best part about his War Scroll change, again, I mentioned earlier that he's got the inclusion of disease abilities, and which we don't need in this allegiance, but they dropped all of the bracketing on his weapons, so all of his weapon profiles they just stay no matter what damage he takes, which is amazing, and so that's why the blade and the flail look so much better. And then with, like I said before, the Gur command ability, he can just sit there, take all this damage in the world, and just keep pumping that out. And of course, I've got this Insensate Rage Thirster who's going his own way, right? He's going to be this other threat. Most people focus on him. Now they're going to have a Guo to focus on. Plus, they've got Bellicor to focus on. And all these guys can be a summon platform. Blue Scribes, of course, auto-running 22, summoning off of them. I really like the Mask. I think the Mask is a really underrated model. She's
one of in my opinion, one of the 2 actually just good units points to value in Slaanesh.
Oh yeah, it was pointed out the Guo should have flaming weapon. Thank you for that, Travis.
Sure.
But yes, the Guo should have flaming weapon. Because you're for the sword. But if you read the Mask's War Scroll and you just keep going, you're like, okay, this sounds good. This sounds really good. Does this stop? This sounds good too. And you're like, 135 points? Yes, please. Especially with the change in heroic recovery, because she can still heal in combat in your hero phase, which others can't do anymore now. And she's super tanky with that 4-up. And she's rerolling hits, and rerolling wounds based on the movement characteristic of the enemy model. She's going to run in charge, but she also piles in 6, so you can auto run her and do that extra fun stuff. She's an excellent unit, and I've pinned down. I've kept units wrapped up that she had no business keeping wrapped up.
Yeah,
for the amount of time she did.
Yeah, because importantly, she has the 4-up ward on the scroll, so she doesn't need to stay near the ruinous aura. She can be wherever she wants. She's on a relatively tiny base. She's on a 32 mil base for what she is, but she just, because, as you mentioned, not only if she can heroic recovery, then she can heal 2d3 in her hero phase, but as it is, because she can always flip the mask over between comedy and tragedy, right? She can just choose to heal a d3 every one of her hero phases. And so she ends up being way tankier than she has any right to be.
Yeah, I always found her the second most frustrating thing about Slaanesh, actually, in 2019. The first thing was them coming in with the Godseekers, hitting A+ charges from crap that they just summoned in. And the second thing was the Mask, because, that little asshole just had no business doing what she would constantly do in her games and in my games. Killing chaff, tying things up, just being an absolute, and just not dying because the heal and the ward. And great piece.
Yeah, it's very funny because, if she's not wounded and you just set her to the plus D3 attacks, she actually will clear out a light chaff unit pretty effectively when she's rerolling hits and wounds, right? And so it's she can do interesting work as a piece. You can't throw her away. If you there are certain things that will turn and smack her off the board, but for 135 points, if you used right, I think she punches way above her weight. Mm-hmm.
She's also a great candidate for Master's Command for that attack on death.
Yeah.
And so, you put her into something way bigger than she should be. If she ends up, taking the hits that you didn't want her to take, she ends up dying. She then just swings back, hopefully with the D3 attacks on her. -1 rend, 1 damage. I mean, she can take out something that you don't think she should be able to. So she's a really good unit. And again, it's the control from things that aren't the usual, demon prints that you can't charge. There's all kinds of different things that where this army can control the board, Keep your units locked down. Another thing, and I don't want to be on the Demon Prince too much, but the mask helps me think of this too, is that when an enemy unit is in combat, I know where it is.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
That there is nothing worse for me than to say, okay, you can't make that charge, and then you're just free to move wherever you want. Like
Right.
that, I do not like that. I want your units to be locked in place, and then that's one less, because then you have to take a whole turn to retreat out.
Right.
And I would much rather you did that, and I knew where you were, especially with a unit that can take a hit, like Pinks or a monster that's got a 5 up after, than have you have a free roamer out there that I can't account for.
Yep. All makes sense. Great stuff, man. That brings us to the end, everybody. Sean, any final thoughts you want to share with everybody on Legion the First Prince? Anything we didn't cover?
No, I think everybody should play the army. You can give it a shot. Vince, are you sold?
It's still not a real army, but there's a lot of fun in these lists you put together. I do like how many different... What I love about this is I think these lists hopefully put to rest the idea that this is only a control army, that you can't do anything else. I think you did a great job here of showing a lot of different dimensions, of using a lot of different units. And, I mean, look, if you've got a bunch of Chaos Demons like I do, why not? Right? Why not? It's that easy.
Which of these 4 lists would you try to run, Vince? So what would you run?
Oh gosh, probably none of them. But like, I don't mean that in any negative way. I just mean like I only have one. No, that's not true. No, I guess I do have 3 Bloodthirsters. Wow, where did that come from? I was suddenly counting in my head how many Bloodthirsters I have, and yeah, I do have 3 of them. I don't know. I would probably go my own way toward a worse list, but try to find some use for my Slanesh demons.
That's understandable. No, Keepers feels good with a 5-up ward. Broadcasting it to others.
You're not wrong there. It's a totally different world when that thing actually doesn't just fall over like a wet bag in the wind. Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, Sean, this was great fun, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
I really enjoyed it. I don't know why I was so terrified.
No issues at all. Thank you to everybody out there who watched. If you haven't hit like yet, please do so. It helps other people find the show, means the world to us, and it's as easy as clicking a little button. If you haven't already subscribed, do that as well. Sean, thank you. Tyler, thank you as always, brother. For all of you out there watching, thank you so much. As always, we really appreciate it, and we'll see you next Wednesday.